Have you ever felt like you are waiting, just waiting, for your real life to begin? Perhaps you're waiting for a different job, the one that will finally make you feel fulfilled, or for a person to enter your life and make everything feel complete. Maybe you are waiting for an apology that you know you deserve, for a sign from the universe that it's the right time to make a change, or simply for the unrelenting pressure of modern life to finally ease up. Just for a moment, we spend so much of our lives in this state of anticipation, like we are secondary characters in our own stories, waiting for the hero to arrive, for the plot to finally move forward, for someone or something outside of us to come and fix what feels broken on the inside. This state of waiting, however, is not a peaceful pause. It is a quiet undercurrent of anxiety, a subtle state of suffering. It is the feeling of being stuck, of handing over the keys to our own happiness, to circumstances we cannot control. We look for external validation, for permission to feel whole, for a savior to rescue us from our own unease. This feeling of helplessness, this constant search for a solution outside of ourselves, is one of the deepest sources of our modern discontent. It drains our inner resources and leaves us feeling like passengers in a vehicle with no driver. But what if the solution isn't out there at all? What if the hero we have been waiting for is not coming? This is not a message of despair, but one of profound, revolutionary empowerment. It's an ancient truth, offered not as a divine command from a god, but as a practical observation from a human being who woke up, a teacher known as the Buddha. He did not present himself as a savior, but as a guide, a finger pointing the way. His teaching is not a dogma to be believed, but a map to be used, and the journey it outlines is one we must each walk for ourselves. For the path to true peace begins with the radical, life-altering realization that the key to your own prison is in your own hand. The light you are searching for in the darkness is the one you must learn to ignite for yourself. The statement at the very heart of this journey, the axis around which this entire exploration of freedom turns, is a simple phrase, translated from the ancient Pali language, Attā, attano, nātho. No one can save you, but yourself. At first, these words might land with a certain harshness, a chilling sense of isolation. In a world where we are encouraged to seek help, to lean on others, to find community, this declaration can sound like a solitary confinement, a heavy burden of responsibility placed squarely upon our already weary shoulders. It can feel like we are being told that in our moments of deepest despair, we are utterly and completely alone. But this is a profound misunderstanding of one of the most liberating truths ever offered to humankind. To truly grasp its meaning is to shift from seeing it as a burden to recognizing it as the ultimate permission slip, the key that unlocks the door from the inside. This is not a declaration of abandonment. It is a declaration of intrinsic power. To begin unpacking this potent phrase, we must first redefine the very concept of being saved. In the Western world, the word salvation is deeply entwined with religious ideas of an afterlife, of a soul being rescued from eternal damnation by a divine, external power. It implies a transaction, a deliverance granted by a deity in exchange for faith or adherence to certain rules. The salvation the Buddha spoke of is something entirely different, something radically immediate and profoundly personal. It is not about securing a favorable position in the hereafter. It is about transforming the quality of your experience, right here, right now. The Pali word for this liberation is nibbana, or nirvana in Sanskrit, which literally means to extinguish or to blow out. What then is being extinguished? It is the flame of the three poisons, the inner fires that fuel all of our psychological suffering, the fire of greed, craving, and insatiable wanting, the fire of hatred, aversion, and ill will, and the fire of delusion, ignorance, and confusion. To be saved, in this context, is to save yourself from the torment of your own reactive mind. It is to find freedom from the endless, exhausting cycle of chasing pleasant experiences and fleeing from unpleasant ones. It is liberation from the anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of our days, from the dissatisfaction that whispers that something is always missing, from the sorrow that clings to us long after a loss has passed. This salvation is not a place you go to after you die. It is a state of being you can cultivate in this very life. It is the unshakable peace that arises when the inner fires have cooled, leaving not a void, but a luminous, spacious, and compassionate awareness. It is the end of suffering, available to any human being willing to do the work to understand its cause and eradicate its roots within their own heart and mind. So, if the goal is to extinguish these inner fires, who is the firefighter? Who is this yourself that is tasked with this monumental job? This is the second crucial distinction we must make. We tend to think of ourselves as a single, solid, continuous entity. This is the self that has a name, a history, a collection of likes and dislikes, a resume of achievements, and a catalogue of failures. This is the self that feels pride when praised and feels wounded when criticized. This is the ego, the constructed identity, the narrator of the story we call my life. But this small, constricted self is not the one who does the saving. In fact, this self is the very source of the fires we seek to extinguish. It is the ego that craves validation, that fears annihilation, that clings to pleasure and pushes away pain. To ask the ego to save us from the problems created by the ego is like asking the arsonist to put out the fire. The self that the Buddha refers to, the Attā, who is the true master, is something far deeper, far quieter, and infinitely more spacious. It is your innate capacity for awareness itself. It is the silent, impartial witness that exists behind your thoughts, emotions, and sensations. It is the part of you that can notice, there is anger arising, without becoming consumed by the anger. It is the part of you that can observe a painful memory without being re-traumatized by it. It is the clear, open sky of the mind, which allows the storm clouds of thought and emotion to pass through without the sky itself ever being harmed or diminished. To become your own master, your own refuge, is to learn to identify not with the passing clouds, but with the vast, ever-present sky. This is your true nature, This awareness is the savior, the refuge, the inner guide. The entire practice of mindfulness and meditation is nothing more than the training of this capacity, learning to step out of the chaotic traffic of the mind and rest in the calm, knowing presence of the observer. This self doesn't need to be created. It only needs to be discovered. It has been there all along. This naturally leads to a valid question: if we must do this all by ourselves, what is the point of a teacher like the Buddha, or of scriptures, teachings, and spiritual friends? Does this principle of self-reliance mean we must reject all guidance? Absolutely not. The Buddha often used a powerful analogy to clarify his role. He was like a skilled physician. He saw that humanity was suffering from a universal illness, the illness of dukkha, or profound dissatisfaction. Through his own efforts, he diagnosed the cause of the illness, our craving and clinging, rooted in ignorance. And then he prescribed the cure, the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical and comprehensive guide to ethical living, mental discipline, and wisdom. But here is the crucial part: no matter how brilliant the doctor or how perfect the prescription, the medicine has no effect if the patient refuses to take it. The Buddha can point the way. He can offer the map. He can describe the destination in exquisite detail, but he cannot walk the path for you. Another famous metaphor is that of the finger pointing at the moon. The teachings, the Dharma, are the finger. The moon is the direct experience of liberation, of Nibbana. A wise person uses the finger to locate the moon and then gazes at the moon itself. A foolish person ignores the moon and instead spends all their time analyzing, worshipping, and clinging to the finger. To deify the Buddha, to blindly worship the scriptures without putting their wisdom into practice, is to miss the entire point of his teaching. The guidance is a tool, an indispensable and precious tool, but you are the one who must pick it up and use it to build your own house of peace. This very message was the Buddha's final and perhaps most important teaching as he lay on his deathbed. At the age of 80, his body failing after 45 years of tireless teaching, his devoted attendant, Ananda, began to weep. Ananda had been by the Buddha's side for decades, and he felt a profound sense of despair and impending darkness. He turned to his master and asked, "The teacher is about to pass away. Who will be our guide now? Who can we turn to?" The Buddha, with his final breaths, offered his ultimate instruction, the culmination of his life's work. He said, "Therefore, Ananda, be a lamp unto yourselves. Be a refuge to yourselves. Take to no external refuge. Hold fast to the teachings as your lamp. Hold fast to the teachings as your refuge. Look not for a refuge in anyone besides yourselves. Think of the incredible power and compassion in that final gift." After a lifetime of guiding others, his last wish was not that they would build monuments in his honor or elevate him to the status of a god. His final plea was for them to realize their own inner capacity, to trust in the truth they could verify for themselves through practice, and to find the light within. He was turning them away from dependence on his physical form and pointing them back toward the eternal refuge of their own awakened mind. This is the heart of Attā, attano, nātho. It is not a command to walk alone in the dark, It is the ultimate act of empowerment. It is the teacher's final, loving whisper, reminding you that you already hold the lamp. The refuge you seek is the ground you are standing on. The power to illuminate the path, to calm the fires, to save yourself from suffering has been your deepest birthright all along. You just have to learn how to turn on the light. If the truth of self-reliance is so liberating, why does it often feel so unnatural, so contrary to our deepest instincts? If the lamp is truly in our own hands, why do we spend so much time searching for light elsewhere? The answer is not that we are weak or flawed, but that we are deeply, powerfully conditioned to do so. We live within a psychological architecture built from birth, reinforced by culture, and designed to make us look outwards for our solutions. We are caught in a subtle but immensely powerful snare, the trap of dependence. Understanding the mechanics of this trap is not an exercise in blame, but an act of compassion for ourselves. It is the first step toward disarming it, toward reclaiming the power we have been taught to give away. The first and perhaps most formidable bar of this cage is our profound fear of responsibility. True freedom is not a gentle, easy thing. It is a territory that comes with an absolute and sometimes terrifying accountability. The moment you accept that you are your own savior, you simultaneously accept that you are the author of your own life. Every choice, every reaction, every success, and every failure ultimately rests with you. This can feel like a crushing weight. It is so much easier, so much more comforting to be a victim of circumstance, to have an external cause for our unhappiness. If we fail, we can blame a difficult childhood, an unfair boss, a political system, or an unloving partner. This act of blaming provides a strange kind of relief. It shields our fragile ego from the painful admission that we may have made a mistake, or that our own patterns of thought and behavior are the source of our problems. It allows us to remain in a state of righteous indignation rather than engaging in the difficult, humbling work of self-inquiry. To take full responsibility means we must look at our own greed, our own anger, our own laziness and confusion, without flinching. It means acknowledging that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we are always 100% responsible for how we choose to respond. This responsibility is the very definition of empowerment, but from the perspective of a mind accustomed to outsourcing its problems, it can look and feel like a terrifying abyss. And so, we seek a savior, a therapist, a guru, a new relationship, a political movement, hoping they will not only solve our problems, but also relieve us of this heavy burden of ultimate accountability. This deep-seated fear is nurtured and amplified by the very process of our upbringing. From the moment we are born, our survival depends entirely on external forces. As infants, when we cry from hunger, pain, or fear, a savior in the form of a parent or caregiver appears to soothe us, to feed us, to make the world right again. This is a beautiful and necessary dynamic for development, but it forges a powerful neurological pathway in our minds. Inner discomfort is solved by an outer solution. This template is reinforced for years. Teachers give us answers. Doctors give us pills. Laws give us structure. We are conditioned to see authority figures as the keepers of solutions. We then carry this deeply ingrained, unconscious script into our adult lives. We project this need for a parental figure onto our bosses, hoping for their approval to validate our worth. We seek a romantic partner, not as an equal to share a journey with, but as someone to complete us, to fill the empty spaces within us, to finally make us feel okay. We follow ideologies and self-help gurus with unquestioning fervor, hoping their 7-step plan or their grand philosophy will provide the definitive map that saves us from the messy, uncertain work of charting our own course. We are not consciously thinking this way. Of course, it is an echo from the past, a psychological habit so deeply ingrained that it operates as our default setting. We are adult children, still subconsciously crying out, waiting for a caregiver to come and make the pain go away. This personal conditioning is then projected onto the vast screen of our culture, where it is magnified and romanticized 1,000 times over. Our collective storytelling is saturated with the savior myth, from ancient fairy tales to modern Hollywood blockbusters. We are fed a steady diet of narratives about rescue and redemption, coming from the outside. The knight in shining armor slays the dragon and saves the helpless princess. The troubled protagonist is fixed by the love of a perfect partner. The brilliant, maverick detective arrives to solve the unsolvable case and restore order. The all-knowing sage on the mountaintop bestows a secret wisdom that changes the hero's life forever. These stories are compelling because they resonate with that deep, childlike part of us that yearns to be rescued, but they also sell us a dangerous fantasy that we are inherently incomplete, that happiness is a prize to be won or a person to be found, and that powerful external agents are the ones who hold the keys to our fulfillment. This cultural narrative teaches us to be passive recipients of grace rather than active creators of our own peace. It suggests that our lives are a problem to be solved by the right person, the right job, or the right belief system, rather than a journey of inner discovery to be lived. We become so fixated on finding this missing piece of our puzzle that we fail to realize that we were never broken to begin with. Ultimately, all of this, the fear of responsibility, the conditioning of childhood, the myths of our culture, is a grand strategy of avoidance. The constant, outward search for a savior is a powerful distraction from the one place we are most afraid to look within. We seek external saviors because we are trying to escape the perceived emptiness and chaos of our own inner world. It is much easier to focus on a new relationship than to sit with our own loneliness. It is more comforting to adopt a rigid ideology than to face our own confusion and uncertainty. It is more exciting to chase a promotion than to confront our own feelings of inadequacy. This brings to mind the poignant metaphor of a bird born in a cage. Every day, the bird is given food and water. The cage is safe, predictable, and free from the dangers of the outside world, the predators, the storms, the struggle of finding its own sustenance. The bird knows nothing else. Its wings, never used, are weak and undeveloped. The very idea of flight is a distant, forgotten instinct. Then one day, someone leaves the door of the cage wide open. The bird hops to the opening, looks out at the vast, open sky, and feels a terrifying thrill. It sees other birds soaring effortlessly on the wind. But its own reality is the familiar comfort of the perch. To fly would mean leaving behind all security. It would mean strengthening its atrophied wings through effort. It would mean facing the unknown alone, and so, paralyzed by fear, it retreats back into the cage and waits for its food to be delivered. The open door is too much responsibility. We are that bird. The cage is the trap of dependence we have constructed for ourselves. And the open door is the realization that we, and only we, have the power to fly. The trap is alluring because it promises safety, but its true cost is our own vitality, our own strength, our own freedom. This constant waiting for rescue is precisely what fuels the background hum of dissatisfaction that defines so much of our lives. It is this fundamental unease, this dukkha, that we must now turn to face directly. We seek saviors because we are trying to escape a fundamental and pervasive sense of unease. This isn't a sign of personal failure. It is the shared inheritance of our human condition. In the language of the Buddha, this underlying friction, this subtle but persistent stress, is called dukkha. This ancient Pali word is often translated into English simply as suffering, and this single translation is perhaps the greatest source of misunderstanding about the entire path. When we hear suffering, our minds immediately leap to images of immense tragedy, acute pain, and deep despair. It leads to the mistaken belief that the core tenet of this philosophy is a grim, pessimistic declaration that life is nothing but agony. But the reality of dukkha is far more subtle, far more intricate, and ultimately, far more relevant to our daily lives. To understand dukkha is not to adopt a negative worldview. It is to finally put a name to the hidden adversary we have been wrestling with our entire lives. It is the first noble truth, not because it is a depressing dogma to be accepted, but because it is a brave and honest diagnosis of our condition. And only with a clear diagnosis can we ever hope to find a cure, to truly grasp its meaning. We can think of dukkha as existing on three distinct, yet interwoven, levels. The first is the most obvious, the dukkha of ordinary pain, or dukkha. This is the suffering everyone recognizes without needing a special term for it. It is the pain of a migraine headache, the sting of a betrayal, the grief that comes with losing a loved one, the fear that arises in the face of uncertainty, the agony of disease, and the sorrow of old age. It is the raw, undeniable pain of body and mind. It is real, sharp, and a universal part of life. When our house is on fire, we don't need anyone to tell us we are in a dangerous situation. This is the most visible layer of our shared human predicament. But if dukkha were only this, it would be an incomplete diagnosis, as it would ignore the majority of our waking experience. The second level is the dukkha of change, or viparinama dukkha. This is a far more subtle and pervasive form of stress. It arises from the inescapable fact that even pleasant experiences are impermanent. Think of a perfect, sunny vacation. The joy we feel is often tinged with the subtle, background anxiety that it will soon end. We try to grasp and hold onto the pleasure, and in that very act of grasping, we create a tension, a resistance to the natural flow of time. A delicious meal ends. A joyful moment with a friend passes. Youth fades into middle age. The happiness we derive from these conditional things is inherently fragile, and the subconscious knowledge of its fragility is a form of dukkha. We suffer not because the experience is painful, but precisely because it is pleasant, and we cannot bear for it to change. We are like children trying to build a sandcastle right at the edge of the tide, constantly scrambling to protect it from the inevitable waves, finding moments of joy, but never a moment of true, unshakable peace. This is the stress of clinging to what is destined to slip through our fingers. The third and most profound level is the dukkha of conditioned existence. Sankhara dukkha. This is the deepest and most persistent form of dissatisfaction. It is not tied to a specific painful event or a pleasant one ending, but is woven into the very fabric of our being as a separate, conditioned self. It is the baseline hum of anxiety, the faint background static of not quite rightness that pervades so much of our lives. Even when things are going relatively well, it stems from the friction of a constantly changing self, living in a constantly changing world, and the subtle, continuous effort required to maintain the illusion of being a solid, separate, permanent entity. It is the restlessness of a mind that can never be truly at ease, always needing to do something, want something, or become something else. It is the existential burden of being a thing in a universe of processes. This is the fundamental illness that the other two levels of dukkha are merely symptoms of. It is this deep, underlying vulnerability that we are trying to escape when we seek saviors and distractions. The Buddha's diagnosis did not stop at simply identifying these symptoms. He pinpointed their source. Dukkha, he taught, does not arise from the world itself. Painful events and pleasant events are not the root cause. The root cause is our mind's reaction to them. It is our thirst, our craving, our relentless wanting, which in Pali is called tanha. It is the insatiable thirst for pleasant sense experiences, for delicious tastes, for beautiful sights, for praise, for comfort. It is the thirst to become something more, to achieve a higher status, to have a better identity, and it is the thirst for things to go away, the thirst for non-existence, the aversion and hatred we feel towards unpleasant experiences and people. We are caught in a relentless cycle, a mental addiction to pushing and pulling at reality. When an unpleasant feeling arises, we immediately push it away. When a pleasant feeling arises, we immediately try to grasp it and make it stay. This constant effort, this struggle against the natural, uncontrollable flow of life, is dukkha. The rain is not suffering, but hating the rain is suffering. The end of a relationship is painful, but refusing to accept its end and clinging to the past is a profound and prolonged form of suffering. The problem is not the wave, but our attempt to stand rigid and unmoving as it crashes against us. There is a beautiful ancient story that illustrates this truth with heartbreaking clarity. A young woman named Kisa Gotami lived in a state of blissful happiness with her husband and their infant son. But one day, tragedy struck, and her baby died, overcome with a grief so powerful it drove her to madness. She refused to accept his death. She clutched the small, lifeless body to her chest and wandered from house to house, desperately begging for a medicine that could bring her child back to life. Some people mocked her, others pitied her, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man saw her desperation and, instead of dismissing her, directed her to the Buddha. She ran to him, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for the miracle medicine. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said he could help her. But first, she must complete a simple task. She must go into the village and bring back a single mustard seed from a house where no child, no spouse, no parent, no servant had ever died. Filled with a surge of hope, Kisa Gautami began her quest. At the first house, a kind woman readily offered her a handful of mustard seeds. But when Gautami asked her crucial question, the woman's face fell. "I can give you all the seeds you want," she said, "but in this house, my husband died only last year." She went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. "My youngest son was taken from me. My parents died in their sleep. I have lost my beloved sister." House after house, she found compassion and mustard seeds, but she could not find a single home untouched by the hand of death. As the sun began to set, the truth washed over her. Her terrible, personal, isolating grief was not hers alone. It was the shared, universal inheritance of all human beings. Loss was not a unique curse that had befallen her. It was a fundamental law of existence. In that moment, her frantic, desperate clinging dissolved into a profound, shared sorrow. She understood. She went to the forest, gently laid her son down, and returned to the Buddha. Not for medicine, but for wisdom. Her journey did not erase her pain, but it transformed it. She had directly experienced the first noble truth. She had seen the universality of dukkha. This is the purpose of naming our condition. It is not an act of pessimism, but one of profound courage and clarity. It is the essential first step that turns us from being a passive victim of our circumstances into an active investigator of our own minds, ready to finally learn the tools that can lead to our own healing. Having looked unflinchingly at the diagnosis, this deep and pervasive dissatisfaction called dukkha, we are left standing at a critical juncture. It is one thing to name the ailment, to acknowledge the subtle fever of unease that runs through our lives, but it is another thing entirely to begin the treatment. Where do we even start if the source of the problem lies within the chaotic, reactive nature of our own minds? How do we begin the monumental task of bringing order to that chaos? Do we need to retreat to a monastery, study ancient texts for years, or find a guru to give us a secret mantra? The answer, according to this ancient wisdom, is radically simple and infinitely accessible. The first step, the foundational tool, the master key that unlocks every subsequent door on this path to freedom, is not something you need to acquire. It is a faculty you already possess. It is the simple, yet profound, power of your own attention. It is the practice of Chan Niyam, or mindfulness. Mindfulness, in its essence, is the art of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. Let's break that down, because within this elegant definition lies a complete manual for transforming your relationship with your mind. Paying attention, on purpose, means this is not a passive state of zoning out. It is an active, intentional choice. Our attention is the most valuable currency we have, and we spend most of it unconsciously, letting it be pulled here and there by every notification, every stray thought, every passing desire or fear. To be mindful is to become the deliberate director of this currency, to choose where we place the spotlight of our awareness. Next, in the present moment, this is a truly radical act. The human mind is a time-traveling machine, but it has only two destinations, the past and the future. We spend countless hours replaying old conversations, nursing old grievances, and reliving past glories, or we project ourselves into the future, rehearsing for anxieties that may never happen, constructing elaborate fantasies, or simply planning our next meal. The one place our mind rarely wants to be is right here, right now, in the only moment life is actually happening. To be mindful is to gently but firmly escort the mind back from its travels in time and have it land in the physical, tangible reality of the present. Finally, and this is the most challenging and transformative part, without judgment, the mind is a relentless labeling machine. As soon as we experience something, we slap a label on it: good, bad, right, wrong, pleasant, unpleasant, like, dislike. This layer of judgment is the primary fuel for dukkha. A neutral sensation in the body becomes a worrying pain. A simple thought becomes a terrible, stupid thing to think. Mindfulness practice is the training of observing our experience as it is. Before we add this second layer of commentary, it is watching a thought arise without condemning it, feeling a difficult emotion without trying to shove it away, noticing a pleasant sensation without immediately clinging to it. This non-judgment is not a state of cold detachment. It is the highest form of kindness and compassion we can offer ourselves. It is allowing our inner world to be exactly as it is, for just a moment, without needing it to be different. This might sound abstract. So how do we practice it? We need an anchor, something to tether our wandering attention to the present moment. And we possess the most perfect anchor imaginable: our own breath. The breath is the ultimate tool for mindfulness. It is always with us, from the first moment of life to the very last. It requires no special equipment and costs nothing. It is a rhythmic, constant process that is happening right now. And most importantly, it is neutral. The breath is simply the breath. The practice can be this simple. Find a comfortable posture, close your eyes if you wish, and bring your attention to the physical sensations of breathing. You might feel the cool air entering your nostrils and the warmer air leaving. You might feel the gentle rise of your abdomen on the in-breath and the subtle fall on the out-breath. You are not trying to control the breath, to make it deeper or slower. You are simply resting your awareness on the raw, physical data of breathing. Your only job is to feel it, and then the inevitable will happen. Your mind will wander. A thought will arise. What should I have for dinner? A memory will surface. An itch will appear on your nose. A sound will distract you. In that moment, you have not failed. In fact, that moment is the heart of the entire practice. The moment you notice, my mind has wandered, is a moment of pure mindfulness. And then, with the gentleness you would use to guide a lost puppy, you simply and kindly escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath, over and over again. Each time you return your attention, you are strengthening a mental muscle. You are performing a single repetition, a bicep curl for the brain, building your capacity for focus and calm. As you continue this practice, a profound shift in perspective begins to occur. You start to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness of your thoughts. This is a life-altering realization. Imagine your mind is like a vast, open sky. Your thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like clouds passing through that sky. Some are bright and fluffy. Some are dark and menacing. But the sky itself is never defined by the clouds. The sky doesn't get damaged by a thunderstorm, and it doesn't try to cling to a beautiful sunset. It has space for all of it. Mindfulness is the practice of learning to identify with the sky, not the clouds. When anger arises, instead of being consumed by it and thinking I am so angry, the perspective shifts to, I notice the sensation of anger is arising within my awareness. This subtle change in internal language creates a space, a buffer. The anger is no longer you. It is something you are observing. In that space, it loses its power to hijack you. It can be seen for what it is, a temporary burst of mental and physical energy that will, like every cloud, eventually pass. This space is the birthplace of freedom. The psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. For most of our lives, there is no space. A driver cuts us off in traffic stimulus, and we immediately lay on the horn and yell reaction. A critical email arrives stimulus, and our stomach instantly tightens in anxiety, reaction. We are living as automatons, run by our ingrained conditioning. Mindfulness practice is what creates and widens that sacred pause. In that pause, you can watch the anger or the anxiety rise up like a wave, and you can choose not to be swept away by it. You have the option to breathe, to see the situation with more clarity, and to respond with wisdom and intention, rather than react with blind habit. This is the very essence of saving yourself, not in some grand, ultimate sense, but in the small, crucial moments that make up a life. It is in these moments that we stop being prisoners of our own minds and start becoming the compassionate masters of our own experience. We are like a musician who, for the first time, truly stops to listen to the sound their instrument is making. They notice the dissonance, the sharpness, the lack of harmony. This listening, this mindful awareness, is the essential first step. Only then can we begin the delicate work of tuning the strings. If mindfulness is the simple, powerful act of listening to the instrument of your own mind, of becoming aware of the sound it is making in each moment, then meditation is the dedicated act of tuning that instrument. You cannot properly tune a violin in the middle of a chaotic symphony performance, just as you cannot effectively work with the deep-seated habits of your mind while rushing through a busy day. Formal meditation is the creation of a sanctuary in time, a quiet room, an inner laboratory where you deliberately withdraw from the world of doing in order to skillfully work on your state of being. It is the gym where you strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. While mindfulness is a quality of awareness you can bring to any activity: washing the dishes, walking to your car, listening to a friend. Meditation is the formal practice you commit to, the scheduled time you set aside to sit down, silence the external noise, and work directly with the raw materials of your consciousness. The first order of business in this inner laboratory is to stabilize the environment. Imagine trying to conduct a delicate scientific experiment on a table that is violently shaking. It would be impossible. Our minds, by default, are like that shaking table, constantly jostled by worries about the future, regrets from the past, and a torrent of internal chatter. The first and most fundamental form of meditation is therefore aimed at calming this agitation. This practice is known as samatha, a Pali word that translates to tranquility or calm abiding. Its primary technique is one we have already met: mindfulness of breathing. By choosing to sit for a designated period, perhaps just 10 or 15 minutes to start, and repeatedly returning our focus to the anchor of the breath, we begin to tame the wildness of the mind. This is far more than a simple relaxation exercise. It is a profound form of mental training. Each time your mind wanders off into a daydream or a worry, and you gently notice this without criticism, and you firmly but kindly escort your attention back to the breath, you are performing a revolutionary act. You are weakening old, unhelpful neural pathways of distraction and strengthening new pathways of focused, calm attention. Think of it quite literally as a workout at a mental gym. You would never walk into a gym, lift a single weight, and expect to see a bicep. You understand that strength is built through consistent, repeated effort over time. The mind is no different. The goal of a sitting meditation session is not to achieve some blissful state of perfect silence where no thoughts arise. Such a goal is a recipe for frustration. The true goal is simply to show up and practice the gesture of returning. The mind will wander 1,000 times, and your task is simply to return it 1,001 times. This patient, persistent training gradually stabilizes the shaking table. The frantic energy begins to subside, creating a foundation of calm from which all deeper work can begin. Once a degree of stability has been established, the laboratory is ready for a different kind of work. We can move from simply observing the mind to actively cultivating positive qualities within it. This practice is known as bhavana, which means cultivation or development. It is akin to gardening. Once the soil has been tilled and cleared of the biggest weeds, we can intentionally plant the seeds of the flowers we wish to see grow. The most powerful of these cultivation practices is metta bhavana, the development of loving kindness. This practice is a direct and potent antidote to the mind's default tendencies toward judgment, criticism, irritation, and ill will. The practice is systematic and beautiful in its simplicity. You begin by generating feelings of warmth and well-wishing for yourself. This first step is often the most difficult, as many of us find it far easier to be kind to others than to ourselves. You silently repeat phrases like, "May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live with ease." You are planting seeds of self-compassion. After a time, you bring to mind a dear friend or loved one, someone for whom it is easy to feel affection, and you extend the same wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. Then, you stretch your capacity by bringing to mind a neutral person, someone you see often but have no strong feelings about, perhaps a cashier at a local store, and you extend the same wishes to them. The practice then courageously moves on to a difficult person in your life, someone with whom you have conflict. Without needing to condone their actions, you attempt to see them as a suffering being, just like you, and you plant the seed of wishing them well. Finally, you radiate this feeling of loving kindness outwards in all directions, to all beings everywhere. Without exception, this practice is not about forcing a feeling. It is about setting an intention. By repeatedly watering these seeds of kindness, you begin to transform the very landscape of your heart. It rewires your automatic response to the world, away from fear and separation, and toward connection and compassion. As we combine the stabilizing power of breath meditation with the heart-opening power of cultivation practices, something remarkable begins to happen. This brings us to our central metaphor, the jar of muddy water. Our mind, in its ordinary state, is like a glass jar filled with water and dirt, constantly being shaken. The water is our innate awareness, and the dirt is our restless thoughts, our anxieties, our fears, our judgments. As long as the jar is being shaken by the constant demands and reactions of daily life, the water remains murky and opaque. We cannot see through it. We try to understand ourselves, to make wise decisions, to find peace, but our view is hopelessly obscured by the swirling chaos. The act of sitting in formal meditation is the act of consciously deciding to stop shaking the jar. We place it on a steady surface, and we simply let it be. We are not trying to force the mud to the bottom. We are not trying to scoop it out. We are just creating the conditions of stillness. And then, through the simple gravity of its own nature, the mud begins to settle. The frantic thoughts begin to lose their energy. The powerful emotions are seen and allowed to be, and they too begin to subside as the sediment of our mental agitation drifts to the bottom of the jar. The water begins to clear. This emerging clarity is the dawn of insight, or vipassana, which means to see clearly or to see things as they truly are. In this newfound stillness, we are no longer just theorizing about our minds. We are observing their fundamental laws directly. We see for ourselves, with undeniable clarity, how a thought is just a thought, an ephemeral event that arises and passes away. We see how an emotion is a wave of energy that moves through the body and also, eventually, recedes. We begin to see the cause and effect relationships that govern our inner world. This is the ultimate purpose of the inner laboratory. not to escape the world, but to see it and ourselves with pristine, unfiltered clarity. So, when the water is finally clear, what are the fundamental laws that we begin to perceive? What is the machinery that our own minds have been running on, just out of sight? All this time, as the waters of the mind begin to clear in the stillness of our inner laboratory, we start to perceive the fundamental mechanics of our own consciousness, laws that have been operating just beneath the surface all along. The first and most critical of these is a principle so often discussed, yet so profoundly misunderstood: the law of karma. In the popular Western imagination, karma has been transformed into a kind of cosmic boomerang or a supernatural justice system. It's the punchline in a joke when someone who cuts you off in traffic gets a flat tire a mile down the road. It's the vague notion that the universe keeps a ledger of our good and bad deeds and doles out rewards and punishments accordingly. This interpretation, while alluring in its simplicity, strips the concept of its true depth and turns a powerful tool for liberation into a passive, fear-based system of fate. To understand karma as the Buddha taught it is to shift from being a spectator, waiting for cosmic judgment, to becoming the conscious architect of your own reality. At its core, the word karma or karma in Pali simply means action. That's it. It is not a mystical force floating in the ether, nor is it a system of divine retribution. It is a natural law, as impersonal and reliable as the law of gravity. Gravity does not punish you for stepping off a cliff. It simply operates. Similarly, karma is the law of cause and effect. As it applies to intentional action, it's not about what happens to you, but about what you do and how that doing shapes who you become. The focus is not on an external reward or punishment, but on the internal transformation that occurs with every choice we make. The entire principle hinges on one crucial element: satana, a Pali word that translates to intention, volition, or will. The Buddha made this unequivocally clear when he stated, "It is intention, O monks, that I call karma. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind." This is a revolutionary statement. It means the moral and psychological weight of an action is determined not by the outcome, but by the quality of the intention fueling it. Imagine two people each giving $100 to a homeless person. The first person does it in front of a camera, hoping to get social media praise for their generosity. The second person does it quietly, anonymously, moved by a genuine feeling of compassion and a desire to alleviate suffering. The external action is identical, but the internal action, the karma, is worlds apart. The first act is rooted in ego and craving for validation, planting a seed of attachment and pride. The second act is rooted in compassion and selflessness, planting a seed of genuine kindness and connection. This planting of seeds is the perfect metaphor for how karma operates. Think of your consciousness as a fertile garden. Every intentional action you take through your body, your words, or even just your thoughts is a seed that you plant in this garden. An act motivated by anger plants a seed of anger. This doesn't mean the universe will now punish you with an angry event. It means you have made it slightly easier for anger to grow in your garden in the future. You have strengthened the neural pathway, the mental habit of anger. Conversely, when you choose to act with patience in a frustrating situation, you plant a seed of patience. You make it slightly more likely that you will be able to access patience the next time you are tested. You are, quite literally, conditioning your own mind. This is where the idea of being your own savior becomes tangibly real. We are not passive victims of a predetermined fate written in the stars. We are farmers every single day. With every choice, we are tending our inner garden. Do we water the seeds of resentment, envy, and greed, or do we nourish the seeds of forgiveness, joy, and generosity? The harvest we will eventually reap is not an external reward from a cosmic judge, but the very character we cultivate. If we consistently plant and water seeds of anger and bitterness, we will inevitably come to experience the world through the lens of an angry and bitter person. The world will seem like a hostile, frustrating place, not because it is inherently so, but because that is the reality our own mind has been conditioned to perceive and create. If we cultivate seeds of kindness, the world begins to reflect that kindness back to us. Because we are attuned to see connection and goodness, we are not being rewarded. We are simply experiencing the natural consequence of the person we have built ourselves to be. One intentional action at a time, this understanding of karma completely reframes our relationship with the past and future. Our present moment is, in part, a result of the countless seeds we have planted in the past. The habits, tendencies, and circumstances we find ourselves in are the ripening of old karma. But in this is the liberating truth. We are not prisoners of those old seeds. A garden may be full of weeds from past neglect, but at any moment, the farmer can choose to start pulling those weeds and planting new flowers. Your past does not define your destiny. It only defines your starting point for today. Your power lies in the seeds you are choosing to plant right now. The past is a memory. The future is a concept. But the present moment is the field where the work is done. It is the only place where you hold the spade and the watering can. This dispels the simplistic notion of instant karma. A farmer who plants an apple seed in the spring does not expect to see a fully grown apple tree the next day. The law of cause and effect operates on its own timeline. Some actions produce immediate results, while others ripen slowly over a long period. This is why we sometimes see unkind people flourishing and kind people suffering. We are all living in a complex web of ripening karma from countless past actions, while simultaneously creating new karma that will ripen in the future. The law is not broken. It is simply more complex than our desire for immediate, visible justice would like it to be. The wise farmer does not despair if there are no apples in May. They simply continue to tend the soil, trusting in the process, knowing that their diligent, intentional action is the only thing they can control, and that the harvest will come in its own time. Understanding this gives us the fortitude to continue planting good seeds, regardless of the immediate external outcome, because we know the true work is internal. It is about shaping the garden of our own heart, a project that makes us more peaceful and compassionate with every seed we sow. This, then, is the ultimate empowerment. We are not waiting for a savior. We are the farmers, the quality of our lives is not a lottery. It is a harvest, and it all begins with the most fundamental action of all the intention we cultivate within the mind. If the law of karma tells us that our intentional actions are the seeds that shape our future, then we must look to the very soil where these seeds are first conceived, the human mind, long before an action manifests through our body or our speech. It begins as a flicker of thought, an intention, an image. This is the seed's conception. The opening verse of the Dhammapada, one of the most revered Buddhist texts, states this with breathtaking clarity. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief, they are all mind wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. This is not merely a piece of poetic philosophy. It is the most fundamental, operational manual for your own consciousness. It declares that the world you experience is not an objective, external reality you are simply dropped into. The world you inhabit is a world built, colored, and projected by the quality of your own mind. We operate under the common sense illusion that we see the world as it is. We believe our eyes, ears, and other senses are like clear windows, feeding us raw, unfiltered data about reality. But this is not the case. Our mind is not a window. It is a projector. It is a powerful, active filter that takes the raw data of reality and instantly interprets it, judges it, and weaves it into a story based on our entire lifetime of conditioning. Our memories, our beliefs, and our current emotional state. When you are feeling anxious, the world appears as a threatening place, filled with potential dangers and obstacles. A neutral comment from a friend is interpreted as a slight. An unknown future becomes a source of dread. When you are feeling joyful, that very same world appears as a place of opportunity and connection. The same neutral comment is heard as an expression of friendship. The same unknown future feels full of exciting possibilities. The external world has not changed at all. The projector bulb inside your mind has changed, and so the entire movie of your life is cast in a different light. We are not experiencing the world. We are experiencing our thoughts about the world. This goes beyond being a passive filter. The mind is the chief architect of our perceived reality. Every repetitive thought pattern we entertain is like a draftsman repeatedly drawing the same line on a blueprint. Over time, that single line becomes a thick, dark, and defining feature of the design. Modern neuroscience gives us a powerful language for this ancient insight: neuroplasticity. Every time you have a thought, a specific set of neurons fire together. When you repeat that thought, those same neurons fire together again, strengthening the connection between them. A thought of self-criticism, "I'm not good enough," is like walking across a grassy field. The first time, you barely leave a trace. But if you walk that same path every day, you begin to wear a groove in the earth. Soon, a well-defined path is formed, and it becomes easier to walk that path than to walk anywhere else. A lifetime of practicing worry creates a 6-lane superhighway for anxious thoughts in your brain. The slightest trigger can send your mind racing down that familiar, well-worn road. In the same way, practicing gratitude, even when it feels forced at first, begins to carve a new path. It may be a tiny, difficult trail through the weeds initially, but with consistent practice, it too can become a broad, welcoming avenue. This is not mystical thinking. This is the biology of how we build our habits of mind. You are, quite literally, shaping the physical structure of your brain with the thoughts you choose to repeatedly engage with. This is where a crucial distinction must be made. Understanding the power of thought is not an endorsement of what is often called toxic positivity. It is not about papering over real pain with simplistic, happy affirmations. It is not about pretending you are not sad when you are grieving, or ignoring injustice by telling yourself everything is perfect. That is a form of self-deception, another layer of resistance to reality. The path of wisdom is one of radical honesty. The work is not to suppress negative thoughts, but to become aware of them without being consumed by them. It is to recognize the negative, self-critical, and fearful stories that our mind automatically generates, and to learn to see them for what they are, just stories. They are not objective truth. They are mental habits, carvings in the brain from past conditioning. You can think of your mind as containing a storyteller that has been narrating your life since you were a small child. For many of us, this inner storyteller is quite cruel. It's a relentless critic, constantly reminding us of our past failures, comparing us unfavorably to others, and whispering terrifying tales about the future. We have become so accustomed to this voice that we mistake it for our own. We believe its stories are undeniable facts. The practice, then, is to become a mindful listener to this storyteller. When the voice says, "You're going to fail at this," instead of automatically believing it, you can learn to step back and observe. That is the storyteller again, telling the failure story. By simply recognizing it as a story, you create a space. You take away its power. You realize you don't have to live inside that story. You can begin, ever so slowly, to tell a new one, not a story of fantasy and denial, but a wiser, more compassionate one, rooted in the reality of your own innate goodness and potential. There is a timeless story that captures this principle perfectly. Two people are confined in the same small prison cell. They have the same meager meals, the same hard bed, the same four walls. Their external circumstances are identical. In the wall is a single window with iron bars. One prisoner spends all day staring downwards at the mud and grime of the prison yard below the window. Their world is defined by the dirt, the confinement, the feeling of being trapped. They see the iron bars as the symbol of their misery, a constant reminder of what they have lost. The other prisoner, however, chooses to look upwards. Through the very same bars, they watch the clouds drift by during the day, and at night, they gaze in wonder at the moon and the vast, glittering expanse of the stars. Their experience is one of spaciousness, of beauty, of connection to something larger than their confinement. The prison bars have not disappeared. The harsh reality of their situation is unchanged, but by choosing where to place their attention, by choosing what story to emphasize. One lives in a mental hell of mud and iron, while the other finds freedom in a universe of starlight. We are all, in some way, in that cell. Life will always present us with unchangeable circumstances, the bars of loss, sickness, and disappointment. But we always have the freedom to choose where we direct our gaze. Are we fixated on the mud of what is wrong? Or can we lift our heads to see the stars of what is still beautiful? What is still possible? Our thoughts are the architects of the world we truly inhabit. But if this is so, why do we find ourselves so stubbornly clinging to the thoughts that build our prisons? Why is it so hard to look away from the mud? The answer to that question lies in the powerful, invisible force of attachment. If our thoughts are the architects that build the very structure of our perceived reality, then attachment is the powerful, invisible glue that holds that structure together, especially the parts that form our prisons. It is the force that makes us cling to the blueprints of our suffering, refusing to believe that another reality is possible. We intuitively understand that clinging to a painful object is counterproductive. If you were holding a burning coal, you wouldn't need a philosophical discourse to convince you to drop it. The immediate, searing pain would be teacher enough. And yet, in our minds, we clutch burning coals all day long. We cling to old resentments, to anxieties about the future, to idealized images of how life should be. And we wonder why our hearts feel so scorched. This force of clinging, of grasping, known in Pali as upadana, is the master culprit behind the transformation of simple pain into prolonged suffering. It is the lock on the cell door. And the most tragic part is that we are the ones holding the key, refusing to turn it. There is a simple yet ingenious method used to trap monkeys in some parts of Asia that perfectly illustrates the mechanics of this self-inflicted imprisonment. A hunter takes a coconut or a gourd, hollows it out, and makes a hole in it just large enough for a monkey's open hand to slide through. Inside, they place a tempting piece of fruit or some nuts. The trap is then tethered to a tree. A monkey, drawn by curiosity and greed, will approach, slide its hand inside, and grasp the bait. But when it tries to withdraw its prize, its clenched fist is now too large to pass back through the narrow opening. It is trapped. The monkey will pull and shriek, growing more and more frantic. But it will not be able to free itself. It is not the hunter's strength or a physical cage that holds it captive. It is the monkey's own refusal to let go of the bait. To be free, all it has to do is open its hand, release the prize, and slide its hand out. But its own craving, its own attachment, is so powerful that it will often remain there, a prisoner of its own desire, until the hunter returns. We are that monkey. Our suffering is the trap, and our attachments are the bait we refuse to release. It is vital to understand that letting go is not the same as apathy or indifference. This is a crucial distinction. To live without attachment does not mean you must become a cold, passionless being who enjoys nothing and loves no one. Quite the opposite. It is the difference between admiring a beautiful rose in a garden and demanding to possess it. You can appreciate its color, its fragrance, its delicate form. That is appreciation. Attachment is the violent urge to rip it from the earth, to claim, "This is mine." The moment you do so, you have killed it. The rose begins to wilt in your hand, its beauty fading. You were so afraid of losing the flower that you destroyed the very thing you loved. Letting go means being able to love the rose fully, to engage with its beauty completely, while accepting that it is a transient, living part of a garden, not a permanent possession to be owned. It is learning to love the world without needing to control it, to participate in life fully without demanding a specific outcome. The objects of our attachment are vast and varied, extending far beyond the material. Yes, we cling to possessions, a new car, a beautiful home, believing they will grant us lasting happiness, only to find the thrill fades and the anxiety of protecting our possessions takes its place. But far more powerfully, we are attached to intangible things. We cling to pleasurable sensations, chasing the next delicious meal, the next moment of comfort, living in a constant state of seeking that leaves us perpetually unsatisfied. We cling desperately to people, not loving them in a free and open way, but seeing them as sources for our own happiness, as props for our own identity. This form of love is a prison for both parties, burdened by expectation and the terror of loss. We are fiercely attached to our opinions, to the need to be right, engaging in bitter arguments, not to find truth, but to defend a fragile sense of self that is propped up by our intellectual positions. Perhaps most subtly, we are attached to our own identity. We have a story of who we are. I am a successful lawyer. I am a healthy person. I am a good mother, and we cling to this story with white knuckles. When reality challenges this story, we lose a case. We get sick. Or children struggle, we suffer immensely. Not because of the event itself, but because the event threatens the story of me that we have become so attached to. The most paradoxical attachment of all is our attachment to our own suffering. It sounds nonsensical, but it is a profound truth, an old grievance, a story of victimization. A long-held sadness can become so central to our identity that the thought of letting it go feels like a kind of death. Who would I be without this righteous anger? Who would I be without this familiar melancholy? The pain becomes a strange, reliable companion. Letting it go would mean stepping into the terrifying, open space of a new identity. And so we clutch the familiar, burning coal because its heat is, at least, a feeling we know. Why do we cling so fiercely? The root cause is our deep-seated terror of impermanence. We live in a universe defined by change, a world where everything is in constant flux. Yet, we crave solidity, certainty, and permanence. Attachment is our futile attempt to build a permanent fortress on the shifting sands of reality. It is a fundamental resistance to the way things are. We believe that if we can just arrange the external world perfectly, get the right job, the right partner, the right amount of money, we can finally be secure and happy. But this is like trying to hold back the tide with a teaspoon. Life will always change. People will leave. Bodies will age. Fortunes will shift. Letting go is not an act of defeat. It is an act of supreme wisdom. It is aligning ourselves with reality rather than fighting a battle against it that we can never win. The practice of letting go, therefore, is not an aggressive act of pushing things away. That is aversion, which is just the other side of the coin of clinging. True letting go is an act of softening, of relaxing the mental fist. It begins with mindfulness. You bring your awareness to the feeling of clinging itself. Where do you feel it in your body? Perhaps it's a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a tension in your jaw. You simply notice it. Without judgment, you become aware of the obsessive thought loops that characterize attachment. Then, instead of fighting it, you breathe into it. You consciously relax the physical tension. You introduce a sense of spaciousness around the thought. You say to yourself, I see this clinging. It's okay. Let me just loosen the grip a little. You start with small things. You let go of your irritation when you're stuck in traffic. You let go of the need to have the last word in a silly argument. You let go of your frustration when your day doesn't go according to plan. Each small act of surrender is a repetition that strengthens the muscle of release. You are training yourself to see that your well-being does not depend on things being exactly as your ego demands. In this practice, we discover the ultimate paradox. By letting go, we lose nothing, and we gain everything. When you let go of needing your partner to be a certain way, you become free to love them for who they actually are. When you let go of being attached to the outcome of a project, you can engage in the creative process with more joy and freedom. When the monkey finally opens its fist, it loses the nuts, but it gains its life and the freedom of the entire forest. We lose our petty attachments, but we gain a profound sense of inner peace, resilience, and a love for the world that is not conditional upon its ability to please us. We are no longer prisoners, frantically pulling against a trap of our own making. We are free, walking through the world with an open hand and an open heart. If attachment is the desperate, clenched fist trying to grasp what we desire, then its fiery twin is the violent, open hand trying to shove away what we despise. This force of pushing away, of resistance, of ill will, is the second great fire that ravages the human heart. We know it most intimately as anger. Of all the mental states that promise power and control, anger is perhaps the most seductive and the most destructive. It arrives like a flash flood, a sudden surge of energy that feels righteous and potent, promising to protect our boundaries and assert our will. But it is a treacherous ally. The Buddha used a chillingly precise metaphor to describe it. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This is the fundamental, tragic miscalculation we make in every moment of rage. We believe our anger is a weapon. We are aiming at an external target, but we fail to see that the weapon is forged in the furnace of our own nervous system, and it sears our own heart long before it ever reaches its intended victim. To begin the work of dousing this fire, we must first understand its nature. Anger rarely travels alone. More often than not, it is a secondary emotion, a brutish, noisy bodyguard hired to protect a much softer, more vulnerable feeling. It is a hard, protective shell around a tender core of hurt, fear, or helplessness. When someone criticizes us, the anger that flares up is often a shield for the hurt of feeling devalued. When we are caught in a traffic jam, late for an important meeting, the fury we feel is often a mask for the fear and powerlessness of being out of control. When we witness an injustice, the outrage we feel can be a defense against the profound sadness and helplessness of seeing others suffer. By learning to look beneath the surface of our own anger, we begin a process of self-compassion. We stop judging ourselves as angry people and start seeing ourselves as wounded people who are using anger as a coping mechanism. This shift in perspective is crucial. It moves us from self-condemnation to gentle inquiry, which is the only ground from which true transformation can grow. Faced with this powerful fire, humanity has generally adopted two equally ineffective strategies: uncontrolled expression or rigid suppression. The first, uncontrolled expression, is the path of venting. We are often told this is a healthy way to get it out of your system, but modern psychology and ancient wisdom agree. This is akin to pouring gasoline on the fire. When you indulge in a fit of rage, yelling, slamming doors, firing off an angry email, you are not releasing the anger. You are practicing it. You are carving the neural pathways of rage deeper into your brain, making it easier and more automatic to get angry the next time. Each outburst is a rehearsal, strengthening the habit, solidifying an identity as someone who reacts with fury. This path leads to broken relationships, chronic stress, and a world that increasingly seems hostile and frustrating because we are training our minds to see it that way. The second failed strategy is suppression. Taught that anger is negative or unspiritual, we try to swallow it, to push it down into the basements of our minds and pretend it isn't there. But the fire does not go out. It smolders. This buried anger turns into a slow, corrosive poison. It becomes resentment, bitterness, cynicism, and depression. It leaks out in passive-aggressive comments, a perpetually critical attitude, and an inability to feel joy and connection. Physically, this chronic, unexpressed anger can contribute to a host of ailments, from high blood pressure to digestive issues. Suppression is not peace. It is a ceasefire with a pressure cooker. The fire is still burning, building pressure underground, waiting for an unexpected moment to explode with a force far greater than the original spark. There is a third way, a skillful middle path that is neither indulgent expression nor fearful suppression. It is the path of mindful transformation. This path has two key steps. The first is to meet the anger with mindfulness. As you begin to feel the first sparks of irritation, instead of being swept away, you train yourself to recognize it instantly. You say to yourself, this is anger. I feel it. You become a curious scientist of your own inner state. Where is it in your body? Is it a tightness in your jaw, a clenching in your fists, a burning sensation in your chest, a racing heart? You simply observe these physical sensations without judgment and without needing them to go away. In this simple act of noticing, you create a sacred pause, a space between the stimulus and your habitual reaction. In that space, you have reclaimed your power. You are no longer the anger. You are the awareness that is observing the anger. The second step is to bring compassion into that space. First, compassion for yourself. You can silently say, "This is painful." Being caught in anger is a form of suffering. You are acknowledging the hot coal in your hand and treating your own burn with kindness. Then, you can gently ask, what is the hurt underneath this anger? This inquiry can reveal the soft, vulnerable feeling the anger is trying to protect. By tending to that primary hurt with compassion, the need for the angry bodyguard begins to dissolve. Once you have offered yourself this kindness, you can, if you are able, attempt to extend it outwards. You can reflect that the person who triggered your anger is also a suffering being. Their harmful words or actions almost certainly came from their own pain, their own ignorance, their own hot coal. This does not excuse their behavior, but it does free you. It allows you to see their action as a symptom of their suffering, rather than a personal attack on you. This understanding is the key that unlocks the prison of hatred. There is a classic story that beautifully encapsulates this principle. One day, a man came to the Buddha and began to insult him with a torrent of vicious, hateful words. The Buddha listened patiently and silently until the man ran out of breath. When he was finished, the Buddha asked him a simple question, "My friend, if you prepare a gift for someone, and that person does not accept it, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, taken aback, replied, "Well, it would belong to me." "Of course." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Exactly. Today, you have come and offered me the gift of your anger and your insults. I have chosen not to accept it." In that moment, the Buddha demonstrated perfect spiritual strength. It was not weakness or passivity. He did not internalize the poison. He simply refused to take ownership of the other man's suffering. This is the power we cultivate when we transform anger. We realize that another person's rage is their hot coal. We are under no obligation to catch it. Transforming anger does not mean becoming a doormat. It does not mean you allow yourself or others to be harmed. You can, and should, set firm boundaries. You can speak out against injustice. You can take decisive action to protect yourself. But when you do so from a place of cool clarity and compassion, rather than blind rage, your actions are infinitely more powerful and effective. You are no longer just another person throwing fire. You have become a force for genuine peace. Starting with the peace you have so courageously cultivated in the landscape of your own heart, we have journeyed into the heart of our inner turmoil, identifying the two great fires that fuel our discontent: the fire of attachment, which is the desperate clinging to what we desire, and the fire of aversion, which is the violent resistance to what we dislike. We have learned to work with them, not through suppression or indulgence, but through mindful, compassionate awareness. Yet, a crucial question remains. What is the source of the fuel for these fires? Why do we cling so tenaciously to things that are destined to change? Why do we rage against a reality we cannot control? The Buddha taught that both of these fires are fed by a single, deep, and powerful root. This root is not an external demon or an original sin, but a fundamental misperception of reality. It is a cognitive fog that blankets our minds, causing us to misread the map of existence entirely. In Pali, this is called avidya, most commonly translated as ignorance. This word, ignorance, is heavy with baggage. It can sound like an insult, implying a lack of intelligence or education. But in this context, avidya has nothing to do with one's IQ or the number of books one has read. A brilliant physicist or a celebrated poet can be just as deeply mired in avidya as anyone else. It is not an ignorance of facts, but an ignorance of nature, the true nature of existence itself. It is a fundamental blindness, a state of not seeing things as they truly are. It is this pervasive, yet unnoticed, ignorance that serves as the fertile soil from which the weeds of greed and hatred grow. It is the first link in the chain of dependent origination, the foundational cause that sets the entire wheel of suffering in motion. So, what is it that we are so ignorant of? What is the reality that this fog obscures? Avidya is a blindness to three fundamental characteristics of all conditioned phenomena, known as the three marks of existence. The first is anicca, or impermanence. Intellectually, we all know this. We know that seasons change, people age, and life is finite. But we don't live as if we know it. We live in a state of practical denial. We build our careers as if they will last forever. We cling to our youth as if it can be preserved. And we build our emotional lives around people and circumstances as if they are permanent fixtures. We are perpetually shocked, wounded, and outraged when reality asserts its true, fluid nature. A relationship ends. Our health changes. A job is lost. And we react as if a fundamental law of the universe has been violated. But the only law that has been violated is our own deluded belief in permanence. Avidya is what makes us try to build a house of solid stone on the surface of a flowing river. Our clinging is the desperate attempt to hold the river back, and our anger is the rage we feel when it inevitably flows on. The second truth obscured by ignorance is dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness we have already explored. Because we are blind to impermanence, we make a catastrophic miscalculation. We seek lasting, deep, and unshakable happiness in things that are, by their very nature, fleeting and unreliable. This is the great fool's errand of the unenlightened mind. We believe that if we can just get the right partner, the perfect job, the ideal home, or achieve a certain level of wealth and status, we will arrive at a permanent state of contentment. Avidya is the voice that whispers, just one more thing, and then you'll be happy. But because everything we acquire is impermanent, the happiness it provides is also impermanent. The thrill of the new car fades. The perfect job becomes a routine. The honeymoon phase ends. The satisfaction is always temporary, leaving us with a subtle sense of emptiness and the need to start the chase all over again. Our ignorance is not in wanting to be happy, but in consistently looking for it in places where it can never be permanently found. The third and most subtle reality hidden by avidya is anatta, or no self. This is perhaps the most challenging and revolutionary of the Buddha's insights. Ignorance convinces us that deep inside each of us, there is a fixed, solid, independent me. This self is the CEO of our being, the unchanging hero of our life story. It is this core I that feels pleasure and pain, the I that owns our thoughts and emotions, the I that needs to be defended, promoted, and gratified at all costs. It is for the sake of this I that we cling to pleasure and praise, and for the sake of this I that we rage against pain and criticism. But the Buddha, upon deep examination of his own experience, discovered that this solid, separate self is an illusion. It simply cannot be found. What we call the self is, in reality, a dynamic, interdependent process, a constantly shifting collection of physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. There is no permanent master in the house, only a continuous flow of interconnected events. This is the deepest layer of our ignorance. We spend our entire lives polishing, defending, and serving a ghost. The antidote to ignorance avidya is not faith or belief, but wisdom panna. And like ignorance, this wisdom is not about accumulating information. It is the direct, experiential seeing of reality as it is. It is the dissipation of the fog. This wisdom is cultivated through the steady practice of mindfulness, which leads to insight, or vipassana. When we sit in meditation and the muddy waters of our mind finally begin to settle, we stop just thinking about these truths and we begin to see them directly. We watch a pleasant feeling arise, and we see for ourselves that it inevitably passes away, anicca. We watch a painful thought torment us, and we see that it, too, dissolves, anicca. We see the constant, subtle stress of wanting things to be different than they are, dukkha. We look for the I who is thinking the thoughts, and we find only the thoughts themselves, anatta. There is a profound ancient story that perfectly captures this process. A man is walking along a path at dusk. In the dim light, he sees a coiled shape on the ground, and his heart leaps into his throat. A snake instantly. His entire body reacts. Adrenaline courses through his veins. His breathing becomes shallow. His mind races with terror. His suffering is intensely real, generated by his perception of mortal danger. Then, another traveler comes along the path holding a lantern. They raise the lantern high, and in its clear, bright light, the man sees the truth. It was not a snake at all. It was merely a piece of coiled rope. The moment he sees the rope for what it is, his fear vanishes completely. It doesn't fade away slowly. It evaporates on the spot. He didn't have to fight the snake, or chant a mantra to make it go away, or analyze his childhood fear of snakes. All he had to do was see clearly. In this story, the dim light is avidya, our ordinary, ignorant state of mind. The snake is the world of our delusions, the illusion of permanence, the illusion of lasting happiness in fleeting things, the illusion of a solid self. Our terror is the suffering, the anxiety, the clinging, the hatred that these illusions generate. The lantern is the light of wisdom, panna, cultivated through mindfulness, and the rope is reality, as it truly is, impermanent, ultimately unable to provide lasting satisfaction, and empty of a separate self. The path to liberation is not a battle against the snake. It is simply the patient, diligent work of bringing more light to the situation. When we see clearly, we are not freed by a savior. We are freed by the truth. And the most stubborn and frightening snake we must learn to see through is the very one we believe ourselves to be. We arrive now at the very heart of the labyrinth, at the final and most profound illusion that our ignorance perpetuates. It is the bedrock upon which the entire edifice of our suffering is built. We have seen that we suffer because we cling and we crave, and we cling and crave because we believe that fleeting experiences can bring us lasting happiness. But who is it that is doing all this clinging and craving? The answer seems obvious. It is I. Me. Myself. This sense of being a solid, continuous, independent self is the most fundamental and unquestioned assumption of our entire lives. It is the invisible protagonist in every story we tell, the central character around whom the entire universe seems to revolve. And yet, it is here, at the very core of our identity, that the Buddha makes his most radical, most unsettling, and ultimately, most liberating discovery. This solid, separate self you believe yourself to be does not, in fact, exist. This teaching, known as anatta, or not self, is not a call to nihilism. It is not a declaration that you are nothing, that life is meaningless, or that you should cease to exist. To hear it this way is to misunderstand it completely. It is, rather, a precise surgical tool designed to remove the deepest and most malignant source of our suffering, the illusion of a fixed and separate ego. The terror this idea can inspire, the fear of annihilation, is the very measure of how deeply attached we are to this illusion. But the path to freedom requires that we have the courage to investigate, to turn the light of awareness onto this self we hold so dear, and to see if we can actually find it. To aid in this investigation, the Buddha deconstructed the human experience into 5 primary components, known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. He taught that everything we identify as me or mine can be found within these 5 categories. By examining each one, we can see if any of them qualify as a permanent, unchanging self. The first is the aggregate of form, or the physical body, rupa. This seems like a solid candidate for the self. It has a name, it has a history, but look closer. Is your body the same today as it was 7 years ago, or even 7 minutes ago? It is in a constant state of flux. Cells are dying and being replaced. It is aging. It gets sick. It feels pleasure and pain. It is an ever-changing biological process. Furthermore, if your body were truly you should have complete control over it. You should be able to command it not to age, not to get sick, not to feel pain. But you cannot. The body follows its own natural laws. So, the body cannot be the permanent self we are looking for. It is a process, not a static thing. The second is the aggregate of feeling vedana. These are the raw sensations that arise from contact with the world: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A pleasant feeling from a warm sunbeam, an unpleasant feeling from a sharp noise, a neutral feeling from the pressure of your chair. These feelings are undeniably real. But are they you? They are as fleeting as the weather. They arise, they exist for a moment, and they vanish, replaced by the next feeling in a never-ending stream. To build an identity on something so fickle and transient would be to build a house on the surface of a stormy sea. Feelings are events that happen to us. They are not the essence of us. The third is the aggregate of perception sana. This is the faculty of recognition and labeling. It is the mind that says blue, tree, dog, threat, opportunity. It is the process of interpreting raw sensory data, but this too is constantly changing, dependent on our culture, our language, our mood, and our past experiences. The same stimulus can be perceived in vastly different ways by different people, or even by the same person at different times. Perception is a conditioned, unreliable process, not a solid, independent self. The fourth is the aggregate of mental formations sankhara. This is a vast and powerful category that includes all of our volitional activities, our thoughts, our moods, our opinions, our prejudices, our intentions, our habits, our beliefs, and our desires. This is the inner storyteller, the voice in the head we so often mistake for our true self. But upon examination, this too is a whirlwind of ceaseless activity. An opinion we held fiercely 10 years ago may seem foolish today. A mood of joy can give way to sadness in an instant. These formations are the product of countless causes and conditions. They are not a unified, coherent self, but a chaotic chorus of conditioned impulses. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness vijnana. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself, the knowing of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and thinking. One might think, aha, here it is. This awareness is the true me. But the Buddha pointed out that consciousness is also not a single, continuous entity. It arises in dependence upon conditions. Eye consciousness arises only when there is an eye and a visible form. Ear consciousness arises only when there is an ear and a sound. It flickers in and out of existence, moment by moment, like a candle flame in the wind. It is not a permanent, monolithic soul, but a series of discrete moments of knowing. So, having analyzed all 5 components that make up our entire experience, we are left with a startling conclusion. We have taken the whole machine apart, piece by piece, and we cannot find the driver. We have examined the entire kingdom, and we cannot find the king. The self is like a rainbow. It appears real, solid, and arched across the sky. But if you walk towards it to find where it touches the ground, you can never get there. It is a phenomenon that arises out of a specific combination of conditions: sunlight, water droplets, and the position of the observer, but it has no independent substance of its own. There is a famous dialogue from an ancient text, the Milinda Panha, that perfectly illuminates this. A wise sage named Nagasena is questioned by King Milinda. The king asks the sage his name, and the sage replies Nagasena, but adds that this is merely a convenient designation, a name for a collection of parts, and that no permanent person can be found. The king, skeptical, asks, if there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes, who eats, sleeps, and studies? He then challenges Nagasena by pointing to his chariot. Is the pole the chariot? Are the wheels the chariot? Is the axle the chariot? To each question, Nagasena says no. Then the king triumphs. Is the chariot something other than its parts? Again, Nagasena says no. He explains that chariot is simply the name we give to the functional assembly of the pole, wheels, and axle. It is a concept, not an intrinsic reality. In just the same way, Nagasena concludes. Nagasena is a convenient name for the collection of the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, but no permanent self can be found within them. To realize this is not to be annihilated, it is to be liberated. The constant, exhausting, lifelong project of defending, promoting, and gratifying the ego can finally be put down if there is no fixed self to be threatened, who is being insulted if there is no permanent entity to fail, whose reputation is at stake. The sharp, personal sting of life's arrows is blunted. Furthermore, when the hard, artificial line between me and you dissolves, a profound and natural compassion arises. We see that all beings are dynamic processes, all caught in the same web of cause and effect, all driven by the same fundamental desire to avoid suffering. To understand not self is to trade the cramped, lonely prison of a separate ego for the boundless, interconnected freedom of being part of everything. It is the ultimate act of letting go, the realization that you are not the static statue on the riverbank, but the ever-changing, ever-flowing river itself. When the solid, defensive walls of the separate self begin to dissolve through the wisdom of Attā, what rushes in to fill the void is not a cold, nihilistic emptiness. What arises is the natural warmth of the universe, the radiant and boundless quality of an open heart. If wisdom is the clear seeing of our interconnectedness, then compassion is the feeling of that interconnectedness. This is karuna, a love that is activated by the presence of suffering. It is one of the most sublime emotions, a testament to our deepest potential and the true measure of our spiritual maturity. But like the other concepts we have explored, karuna is often misunderstood. It is not pity. Pity looks down from a position of superiority. It says, "Oh, you poor thing, how terrible your situation is compared to mine." Pity creates distance. Karuna, on the other hand, is the trembling of the heart in response to seeing pain. It is the brave willingness to suffer with another. It arises from the recognition that their suffering is not separate from your own. It closes the distance, declaring, "Your pain is my pain. Your struggle is my concern." Like all profound inner work, the practice of compassion must begin with the one person we are most often inclined to overlook and judge harshly ourselves. There is a deep and practical wisdom in this. You cannot draw water from an empty well. To attempt to offer a boundless compassion to the world while maintaining a state of inner warfare with yourself is not only unsustainable, it is often inauthentic. We end up playing the role of a compassionate person, while inside, the inner critic continues its relentless campaign of shame and judgment. True karuna must therefore be built on the bedrock of self-compassion. This is not self-pity or selfish indulgence. It is a courageous act of turning towards our own dukkha with the same kindness and tenderness we would offer a beloved friend who was struggling. It is the practice of meeting your own failures not with scorn, but with the gentle whisper, "It's okay. Learning is difficult." It is looking at your perceived flaws, not with disgust, but with the understanding that they are part of your conditioned human experience. It is acknowledging your own pain, your loneliness, your fear, without immediately trying to fix it or run away from it, but simply holding it in a space of warm, loving awareness. This is a profound shift. We spend so much of our lives trying to be worthy of love, believing we must first become perfect to deserve kindness. Self-compassion teaches us that we are worthy of kindness precisely because we are imperfect, because we are vulnerable, because we suffer. By learning to attend to our own wounds with a gentle hand, we develop the capacity and the authenticity to then offer that same healing touch to the world. We fill our own well, so that its waters may overflow and nourish those around us. Once this foundation is laid, we can begin to expand the circle of compassion outwards. The wisdom of not-self anatta is our greatest ally in this endeavor. When we truly begin to see that our own self is a dynamic process, and that our suffering arises from universal causes, like clinging and ignorance, the illusion that another person's suffering is fundamentally different from our own begins to crumble. We see the angry person not as a monster, but as a being trapped in the fire of aversion, just as we have been. We see the greedy person not as evil, but as someone desperately seeking happiness in the wrong places, just as we have done. Their outer actions may be different, but the inner mechanics of their suffering are identical to our own. This recognition is the engine of empathy. It dissolves the artificial barriers of us versus them, friend versus enemy. We begin to see the world as a vast network of interconnected beings, all sharing the same fundamental wish to be happy and to be free from suffering. When you see a stranger on the street with a look of worry on their face, you can connect with the feeling of worry within yourself. Their struggle is no longer an abstract event. It resonates within your own heart. This does not mean you are overwhelmed by the world's pain. Paradoxically, this shared resonance makes you more resilient. It is the feeling of isolation that makes suffering unbearable. The feeling of shared experience, of compassionate connection, gives us the strength to face pain, both our own and others, with courage and an open heart. Karuna is not merely a passive feeling. It is an active motivation. It is the trembling of the heart that gives rise to the powerful aspiration. May this being be free from suffering. This aspiration then fuels compassionate action. These actions need not be grand, heroic gestures. True compassion lives in the small, everyday moments. It is in the act of putting down your phone and truly listening with your full presence to a friend who is in distress. It is in offering a kind word instead of a sharp judgment. It is in the patience you show to a flustered store clerk. It is in the forgiveness you extend to someone who has made a mistake. These small acts of kindness are the daily practice of karuna. the way we make this sublime emotion a living reality in our lives. We can also train this compassionate muscle through formal meditation, actively bringing to mind those who are suffering and systematically radiating the heartfelt wish for their liberation from pain, strengthening our intention and making it a more readily available response in our daily encounters. The life of the Buddha is filled with stories that demonstrate this principle, but none more poignantly than that of the sick monk. The story goes that the Buddha and his attendant Ananda were visiting a monastery when they came upon a monk who was gravely ill with dysentery. He was lying alone in his own filth, utterly neglected by the other monks, who were repulsed by his condition and his cries of pain. Without a moment's hesitation, the Buddha instructed Ananda to fetch water. While Ananda boiled the water, the Buddha himself began to gently lift the sick man. Together, they carefully washed the monk's soiled body and robes, moved him to a clean bed, and tended to his needs. Afterwards, the Buddha gathered the other monks together. He asked them why they had abandoned their brother. He reminded them, "You have no mother or father here to care for you. If you do not care for one another, who will?" And then he delivered one of the most powerful teachings on compassion ever recorded. "Whoever, monks, would wait upon me, he should wait upon the sick." In this single, profound act, the Buddha revealed the very essence of karuna. The highest spiritual attainment is not found in solitary states of bliss, but is expressed in the most humble, hands-on acts of service to those who are suffering. Compassion is the bridge between wisdom and the world. It is the natural, radiant warmth of a heart that has been cleared of the clouds of ignorance. It is the force that transforms the solitary quest for personal enlightenment into a shared journey of healing, a boundless embrace that holds the entire world. If compassion, or karuna, is the heart's tender response to the sight of suffering, then its luminous twin, its joyful counterpart, is mudita. This is the sublime and often elusive quality of sympathetic or appreciative joy. It is the ability to rejoice in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others, while compassion feels like a necessary and noble virtue. Mudita can often feel like a more difficult and distant goal. Why? Because while few of us enjoy seeing others suffer, many of us struggle with a secret, painful, and deeply ingrained habit when we see others succeed, the habit of envy. Envy is a poisoned thorn in the heart of humanity. It is the bitter, sinking feeling that arises when a friend announces a promotion, when a colleague receives praise, or when we scroll through social media and see curated images of others' perfect vacations, beautiful families, and glittering achievements. In those moments, instead of feeling joy for them, we feel a sense of lack in ourselves. Their success feels like our failure. Their light seems to cast a shadow over our own lives. This quiet, corrosive suffering is the polar opposite of mudita, and learning to transform it is one of the most liberating practices we can undertake. The root of envy, jealousy, and comparison lies in a deep and flawed belief system, the scarcity mindset. Unconsciously, we operate as if the world is a great cosmic pie with a limited number of slices. If someone else gets a large slice of happiness, success, wealth, or love, it must mean there is less available for us. Life becomes a grim, zero-sum competition. This mindset is a direct product of the ego, the illusion of the separate self we have explored. The ego is fundamentally insecure. Its primary project is to establish its own worth by constantly measuring and comparing itself to others. Am I smarter than them? Am I more successful? Am I more attractive? This endless internal monologue of comparison is utterly exhausting and is a core driver of our dissatisfaction. When we hear of another's good fortune, the insecure ego immediately feels threatened. It interprets their gain as our loss, reinforcing its own painful story of inadequacy and lack. Envy is the distress signal of an ego that feels it is losing in the great competition of life. It is a lonely and isolating prison, forcing us to see other people not as fellow travelers, but as rivals who threaten our own fragile sense of worth. Mudita is the key that unlocks this prison. It is the radical and joyful declaration that happiness is not a limited resource. It is an infinitely renewable energy source. Another person's success does not diminish your potential. It simply adds more light, more inspiration, and more joy to the world. To practice mudita is to consciously step out of the scarcity mindset and into a mindset of abundance. It is to learn how to warm your hands at the fire of another person's happiness without feeling the need to possess the fire for yourself. The feeling of mudita is clean, bright, and expansive. It is the pure, unselfish delight a grandparent feels while watching a grandchild play, a feeling untainted by competition or ego. It is the genuine happiness that uplifts your heart when you see two people deeply in love. The practice of mudita is the intentional cultivation and expansion of this beautiful human capacity. How, then, do we practice this? How do we work with a habit as deeply ingrained as envy? We start, as always, where it is easiest. You do not begin your weightlifting journey by trying to lift the heaviest weight in the gym. Similarly, you do not begin practicing mudita by trying to feel happy for your greatest rival. You start by bringing to mind someone you love dearly, someone whose happiness is inextricably linked with your own. Perhaps it is your child, a cherished friend, a partner, or even a beloved pet. Bring their image to mind, and then reflect on a moment of their genuine happiness. Picture their smiling face when they achieved a long-sought goal, or their simple, unself-conscious laughter. As you hold this image, allow yourself to feel the joy that arises in your own heart. Notice that their happiness does not take away from yours. It adds to it. This is mudita. Dwell in this feeling. This first step is crucial because it proves to you that you are capable of this emotion. The seed of mudita is already within you. From this strong foundation, you can begin to expand the circle. Bring to mind an acquaintance, someone you feel neutrally about. Perhaps you hear through the grapevine that a colleague you barely know has just had a healthy baby, or has received some good news. The mind's default habit might be to register this as neutral information and move on. The practice of mudita is to consciously pause for a moment. Instead of letting the moment pass, you can intentionally generate a kind thought. How wonderful for them. I am happy that they are happy. May their joy and good fortune continue. You are gently redirecting the mind away from indifference and towards a warm, appreciative joy. You are exercising the muscle of mudita, the greatest challenge and the most transformative practice is to attempt to generate mudita for someone you envy or feel competitive with. This can feel impossible at first. When you hear of their success, the familiar thorn of jealousy may arise instantly. The first step is to meet that feeling of envy with mindfulness, not judgment. Acknowledge it. There is envy. This feels painful. Then, with a moment of wisdom, you can recognize that this envy is your suffering, not theirs. It is a hot coal in your own hand. The desire to be free from this pain can become the motivation to practice. You don't have to force a feeling of ecstatic joy. You can start with a simple, intellectual acknowledgement. They worked hard for that. They, like me, wish to be happy. I will try to wish them well. You can silently offer the intention. May you enjoy your success. May you be happy. This act, however small, is a profound form of healing for yourself. It is the brave and compassionate act of extracting the poisoned thorn from your own heart. A special form of mudita is also to rejoice in the virtuous and wholesome actions of others. When you see someone perform an act of generosity, courage, or kindness, let it uplift and inspire you. This practice is a powerful antidote to cynicism and despair about the state of the world. Mudita is the joyful celebration of life's goodness, wherever and in whomever it appears. It is a recognition that we are all participants in a shared human journey, and every victory for one is a victory for all. It is the third of the 4 divine abodes or Brahmaviharas taught by the Buddha. Standing alongside loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, we have learned to meet ourselves and others with kindness, to tremble with compassion at the sight of suffering, and to rejoice in the presence of joy. But what is the quality that holds all of these vast, open-hearted states in balance? What prevents us from being completely overwhelmed by the world's sorrow or carried away by its joys? This leads us to the 4th and final divine abode, the stabilizing wisdom that crowns them all, equanimity. We have cultivated a heart of boundless kindness, learned to tremble with compassion for all who suffer, and practiced the rare art of rejoicing in the joy of others. We have built a magnificent inner mansion with rooms of love, empathy, and appreciative joy. But this mansion needs a foundation, a deep, unshakable bedrock that can withstand the inevitable earthquakes of life. This foundation is upekkha, or equanimity. It is the 4th and final of the divine abodes, and it is the quiet, stabilizing force that holds all the others in a perfect, harmonious balance. It is the pinnacle of emotional wisdom, the serene and spacious heart that has found its true center. Like the other great virtues, equanimity is often misunderstood. Hearing the word, we might picture a cold, distant détachement, an aloof indifference to the world's joys and sorrows. This could not be further from the truth. Apathy is a state of shutdown, a defense mechanism born of fear, a refusal to feel. Equanimity, in stark contrast, is born of a vast and open heart, that feels everything, but is no longer knocked off its center by what it feels. It is not about caring less. It is about caring in a wiser, more profound, and more sustainable way. It is the calm, unwavering strength of a mighty mountain, which remains steadfast and majestic, whether it is bathed in brilliant sunshine or lashed by a ferocious storm. The weather changes constantly on its slopes, but the mountain's core remains unmoved. The storms that lash the slopes of our own lives are what the Buddha called the 8 worldly winds. These are the 8 conditions that blow constantly in every human life, pushing and pulling us, defining our emotional weather, and causing us to lurch between elation and despair. They come in 4 pairs of opposites: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and disrepute. Our entire unenlightened life is a frantic dance, trying to run towards the winds of pleasure, gain, praise, and fame, while desperately trying to run away from the winds of pain, loss, blame, and disrepute. This frantic, exhausting chase is the very engine of our dukkha. We believe that if we can just manage to experience only the 4 favorable winds, we will have achieved happiness. But this is an impossible task, a battle against the very nature of existence. Equanimity is the cessation of this battle. It is the profound realization that true peace does not come from controlling the winds, but from developing an unshakable inner stability that is no longer at their mercy. How do we develop such a profound balance? Equanimity is not achieved through willpower or suppression. It arises naturally as the fruit of wisdom, specifically from the deep, experiential understanding of the 3 marks of existence we have already explored. When we truly, deeply understand anicca, impermanence, our relationship with the 8 winds is transformed. When praise comes, we can appreciate it, but we don't cling to it, because we know it is just a fleeting sound, a momentary ripple in the air. When blame comes, it is still unpleasant, but we don't fall into despair, because we know that it, too, is impermanent and will pass. We see gain and loss not as permanent states of arrival, but as temporary stations on a continuous journey. The deep knowing of this too shall pass becomes our anchor in the storm, preventing us from being swept away by either the giddy highs or the devastating lows. When we understand dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of chasing conditional states, we see the futility of banking our happiness on the worldly winds. We recognize that even when we get what we want, the praise, the gain, the pleasure, it never delivers the lasting fulfillment we crave. This insight loosens our desperate grip. We stop being addicted to praise and pathologically averse to criticism, because we know that neither holds the key to the ultimate peace we seek. That peace can only be found in the stability of our own well-trained mind, independent of external conditions. And when we understand anatta, not self, we develop the ultimate protection. Who exactly is being praised or blamed? Who is it that is experiencing gain or loss? It is the conventional self, the constructed story of me. When we see that this self is not a solid, permanent entity, but a fluid process, the personal sting of the 8 winds is dramatically lessened. The praise is not inflating a real ego, and the blame is not wounding a real, solid core. It is all directed at a concept, a ghost. This doesn't mean we become immune to feeling, but the feeling is no longer taken so personally. It's like watching a movie of our life rather than being lost in it as the main character. The drama is still there, but it is held within a larger, more spacious awareness. From this fertile ground of wisdom, equanimity blossoms. It is the ability to love someone with your whole heart, without your happiness being dependent on their actions or their presence. This is the difference between love and attachment. It is the ability to work passionately for a cause you believe in, without being shattered if you do not achieve the desired outcome. This is the difference between committed action and obsessive striving. It is the ability to feel compassion for a suffering being, without being drowned in their pain. This is the difference between true compassion and empathetic burnout. Equanimity is the great protector of the other three divine abodes. Without the balance of equanimity, loving kindness, metta can easily curdle into attachment and grief. Without equanimity, compassion, karuna, can become overwhelming, leading to what is sometimes called idiot compassion. Unwise actions born from an inability to bear witness to pain. Without equanimity, sympathetic joy, mudita, can become a kind of manic excitement, still caught on the roller coaster of external events. Equanimity is the vast, open, and wise container that holds all these other precious qualities, allowing them to be pure, powerful, and of genuine benefit to the world. It is the ultimate expression of freedom, a profound peace that the world cannot give, and therefore cannot take away. It is the quiet, smiling wisdom of the farmer in the old story, who, when his neighbors celebrate his good fortune or lament his bad fortune, simply replies, "Good luck, bad luck." Who knows he is not indifferent. He is wise. He knows that life is a complex, unfolding mystery, and he has found his peace not in trying to predict or control it, but in resting in the vast, open-hearted, and unshakable balance of a truly liberated mind, having explored the sublime, open-hearted states of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. It would be easy to imagine the path to awakening as a smooth, linear ascent into ever-increasing bliss. But the reality of the inner journey is far more rugged. It is a path with valleys as well as peaks, with bewildering fog as well as brilliant sunshine. After moments of profound clarity can come periods of deep confusion. After feeling a surge of compassionate connection, we can find ourselves assailed by one of the most formidable obstacles to progress, the hindrance of doubt. For the modern, rational mind, the very word faith can be a barrier, evoking images of blind belief, unquestioning dogma, and the surrender of critical thinking. We are taught to be skeptical, to demand evidence, and to question authority. How can this empirical mindset be reconciled with a spiritual path? It is here that the Buddha's approach reveals itself to be profoundly scientific and uniquely suited to our age. He did not demand blind faith from his followers. In fact, he actively discouraged it. The classic illustration of this is his discourse to the Kalama people. The Kalamas were a community beset by confusion. Teacher after teacher would pass through their town, each proclaiming that their doctrine was the one and only truth, and that all others were false. Bewildered, they approached the Buddha and asked him how they could possibly know who to believe. His response became a legendary charter for free and intelligent inquiry. He did not say, "Believe in me, for I am the enlightened one." Instead, he told them to put aside all dogma, tradition, and hearsay. He advised them not to believe something simply because it was in a sacred text, or because it came from a revered teacher. His revolutionary criterion was this: when you know for yourselves, through your own direct experience, that certain things are unwholesome, unskillful, and lead to harm and suffering, then you should abandon them. And when you know for yourselves that certain things are wholesome, skillful, and lead to welfare and happiness, then you should undertake them and abide in them. This is not a call for faith in a deity, but a call for faith in a process. The laboratory is your own mind. The experiment is the practice of mindfulness and ethical living. And the evidence is the tangible reduction or increase of suffering in your own life. The Buddha was essentially saying, don't just take my word for it. Here is a hypothesis and a method. Test it rigorously for yourself and let the results be your guide. This is an approach that honors our intelligence and empowers us as the arbiters of our own truth. However, we must distinguish this intelligent inquiry from the corrosive, paralyzing hindrance of skeptical doubt, known in Pali as visikiccha. Healthy inquiry is the engine of learning. It asks how and why in order to understand more deeply. The hindrance of visikiccha, on the other hand, is a state of indecisive, cynical wavering. It is the voice that whispers, "Does any of this really work? Am I just wasting my time? Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Perhaps there's a better, faster way." This kind of doubt is not a tool for investigation. It is a poison that drains our energy and prevents us from ever committing to the practice deeply enough to get any results. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We doubt the path, so we practice half-heartedly. We get meager results, which then proves to us that the path doesn't work. It is a vicious cycle that keeps us stuck in a state of perpetual stagnation. The antidote to this paralyzing doubt is the development of saddha. This Pali word is often translated as faith, but a far more accurate and helpful translation is confident, trust, or verified conviction. Saddha is not a blind leap in the dark. It is a quality that grows and matures in stages. Grounded in reason and confirmed by experience, we can understand this development through the analogy of a sick person and a skilled physician. The first stage is what we might call bright faith or initial trust. A person is suffering from a mysterious illness. They hear testimonials about a brilliant and compassionate doctor who has cured many people based on the doctor's reputation, and perhaps a direct meeting where they feel the doctor's wisdom and kindness. They develop an initial trust. They are not yet cured, but they have enough hope and confidence to accept the prescription. This is the first stage of saddha. We encounter the teachings of the Dharma, perhaps by reading a book or listening to a teacher. The teachings on suffering, impermanence, and compassion resonate with our own experience. The path seems logical and noble. We feel an initial spark of inspiration and trust that gives us the motivation to try the practice, to take the medicine. The second stage is verifying faith or growing confidence. The patient goes home and begins to take the prescribed medicine. After a few days of consistent application, their fever starts to break. Their energy begins to return. The pain lessens. Now, their confidence in the doctor and the medicine is no longer based on hearsay or reputation. It is based on their own direct, verifiable experience. The treatment is working. This is the crucial second stage of Attā. We begin to practice mindfulness meditation consistently. We start to notice that we are slightly less reactive in stressful situations. We see a difficult emotion arise and pass without hijacking us. We feel moments of genuine peace or compassion. We are seeing for ourselves that the practice is having a tangible, positive effect. Our confidence is no longer just an idea. It is becoming an embodied reality. This direct feedback is what fuels our desire to continue on the path. The third and final stage is established faith or unshakable conviction. After completing the full course of treatment, the patient is completely cured. Their health is fully restored. Their knowledge that the medicine works is now absolute. It is not a belief. It is a certainty rooted in the undeniable reality of their own healed body. They would recommend the doctor and the medicine to others with complete conviction. This is the ultimate stage of Attā on the path. It arises from moments of profound insight, or vipassana, where we don't just understand the concepts of impermanence or not self intellectually, but we experience their truth directly in the crucible of our own consciousness. Once you have seen for yourself, even for a moment, how an emotion dissolves into nothingness, or how the solid self is nowhere to be found, your conviction in the truth of the Dharma is no longer something that can be shaken by external argument or internal doubt. It becomes a deep, inner knowing. This confident trust is placed not in a savior God who will do the work for us, but in our own potential and in the efficacy of the path. It is a confidence in the Buddha as a reliable guide who has walked the path to its end. A confidence in the Dharma as a true and effective map, and a confidence in our own innate capacity to follow that map and achieve the same result. Attā is the quality that overcomes the paralysis of cynical doubt. It is the courageous heart that says, "This path is worthy of my trust and my effort." It provides the clarity and the why for our journey. And once we have this conviction, we must then summon the next crucial quality, the energy to actually walk the path, day in and day out. If confident trust, or Attā, is the compass that points us in the direction of freedom, then right effort, or virya, is the engine that propels us along the path. Conviction alone is not enough. A map, no matter how accurate, cannot transport you to the destination. To make the journey, you must take step after step, and this requires energy, diligence, and persistence. However, the concept of effort in our modern, driven culture is often laden with tension and stress. We associate it with aggressive striving, with gritting our teeth and making it happen, with a relentless push towards a goal that often leads to burnout and exhaustion. This is not the kind of energy the Buddha was talking about. Virya is not a tense, white-knuckled striving. It is an energy that is balanced, intelligent, joyful, and sustainable. It is the steady, unwavering strength of a great river flowing to the sea, not the frantic, short-lived splashing of a child in a puddle. The secret to this sustainable energy lies in the principle of balance, which the Buddha illustrated perfectly in the story of a monk named Sona. Sona was a musician before he ordained, and he was fiercely dedicated to his spiritual practice. He practiced walking meditation with such intensity that the soles of his feet cracked and bled. Yet he felt he was making no real progress and became discouraged. The Buddha, knowing his state of mind, came to him and asked a simple question. Sona, when you were a layman, were you not skilled at playing the lute? Yes, Lord, I was, he replied. And what do you think? The Buddha continued, if the strings of your lute were tuned too tightly, would it be resonant and playable? No, Lord, Sona said. And if the strings were tuned too loosely, would it be resonant and playable? No, Lord. But when the strings were not too tight and not too loose, but tuned to an even pitch, was your lute then resonant and playable? Yes, Lord, Sona affirmed. In the very same way, Sona, the Buddha concluded, effort that is too strenuous leads to restlessness, and effort that is too lax leads to laziness. Therefore, determine the proper pitch of your energy and aim your mind at that. This teaching of the lute string is the golden rule for our entire practice. Too much tension, whether in meditation or in life, creates stress and agitation. We try to force our minds to be quiet. We get angry at our thoughts. We beat ourselves up for not making progress fast enough. And eventually, the string snaps. We burn out and give up. On the other hand, too little tension leads to a dull, sleepy, and complacent state. We drift through our meditation in a pleasant haze, or we let our days be run by lazy habit, and no transformation occurs. Right effort, or virya, is the art of finding that perfect pitch, a state of relaxed alertness, of bright and gentle persistence. To help us apply this balanced energy intelligently, the Buddha provided a brilliantly practical framework known as the 4 right efforts. This is a complete blueprint for mental cultivation, for becoming the wise farmer of our own mind. The first right effort is to prevent unwholesome states from arising. This is the effort of a wise gatekeeper. You learn to guard the senses, recognizing what inputs tend to lead to suffering. If you know that scrolling through social media for an hour fuels feelings of envy and inadequacy, mudita's opposite. The right effort is to choose to put the phone down. If you know that engaging in gossip or angry political debates leaves your mind agitated and unkind, the right effort is to politely excuse yourself from such conversations. This is not about hiding from the world. It is about proactively choosing not to invite disturbance and negativity into the sanctuary of your mind when you can avoid it. It is the wisdom of not planting weed seeds in your garden in the first place. The second right effort is to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Despite our best efforts as gatekeepers, negative states will inevitably arise, A thought of anger, a wave of jealousy, a bout of anxiety will appear in the mind. The untrained response is to either indulge it yelling in anger or suppress it, pretending it's not there. The right effort is to do neither. It is the effort of mindfully recognizing the unwholesome state, seeing it clearly without judgment, and then gently letting it go. We don't feed it with more stories and justification. We relax the mental fist that is clinging to it. We return our attention to our breath or to a more wholesome object. This is the gardener who sees a weed has sprouted and, instead of letting it take over or pretending it isn't there, calmly and skillfully removes it from the soil. The third right effort is to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the joyful, creative aspect of the path. It is recognizing that we do not have to be passive victims of our moods. We can actively cultivate the good. This is the effort of intentionally bringing to mind a feeling of gratitude, of deliberately practicing loving kindness, metta meditation for 5 minutes, of consciously looking for things to appreciate in our surroundings. It is the effort of choosing to read an inspiring book, listen to uplifting music, or seek out the company of wise and kind friends. This is the gardener who intentionally plants the seeds of beautiful flowers and nourishing vegetables, actively creating the causes and conditions for a beautiful and healthy mind. The fourth right effort is to maintain wholesome states that have already arisen. Often, when a moment of genuine peace, clarity, or joy arises, our habitual restlessness causes us to immediately move on to the next thing, barely registering the positive state. This fourth effort is the skill of recognizing and savoring the wholesome. When you feel a moment of peace, the effort is to pause, to breathe it in, to let it permeate your being. When you feel a surge of love or compassion, you rest in it, allowing it to stabilize and strengthen. This is the gardener who, upon seeing a tender sprout emerge, makes sure it gets enough sunlight and water, protecting it so it can grow strong and blossom fully. The spirit of virya is captured perfectly in the timeless fable of the tortoise and the hare. The hare is full of intense, sporadic, ego-driven energy. He sprints, full of pride and arrogance, and then, confident in his own speed, he becomes complacent, distracted, and falls asleep. The tortoise, on the other hand, embodies right effort. His progress is not flashy. It is slow, humble, but absolutely unwavering. He takes one steady step after another, never losing sight of the goal, never becoming complacent. His is the victory of persistence over talent, of steady diligence over unreliable genius. The path to awakening is not a sprint. It is a marathon. Virya is the tortoise's steady, balanced, and relentless heart. Ultimately, this persistent effort, this discipline, is not a form of self-punishment. It is a profound act of self-love. The discipline to sit in meditation each day, even when you don't feel like it, is a gift you are giving to your future self. The effort it takes to turn away from a harmful habit is an investment in your own future peace. This is the balanced, intelligent, and joyful energy that brings the whole path to life, fueled by conviction and guided by wisdom. This is the force that allows us to walk, step by steady step, out of the prison of our own conditioning and into the bright, open landscape of freedom. After journeying through the landscapes of the mind and heart, we have gathered the essential qualities needed for our liberation. We have the confident trust saddha to undertake the path and the balanced, persistent energy virya to walk it. We understand the nature of our suffering dukkha and the tools of mindfulness and compassion to work with it. But a collection of tools and a willingness to travel are not enough. We need a map. We need a comprehensive blueprint that shows how all these individual practices and virtues fit together into a single, cohesive, and transformative way of life. This master plan is precisely what the Buddha offered in his very first teaching after his enlightenment. It is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, the path that leads to the end of suffering. It is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is crucial to understand that this is not a sequence of 8 linear steps. You complete one after another. It is not like climbing a ladder. It is more like a beautiful, intricate braid where 8 strands are woven together to create a single, strong cord that can pull us to freedom. Or, to use a classic Buddhist metaphor, imagine you need to cross a great river of suffering to reach the farther shore of Nibbana, of peace. The Eightfold Path provides the design for a raft. Each of the 8 factors is an essential component, and they all must be bound together to create a vessel that is sturdy, steerable, and capable of making the journey. To make this profound teaching easier to understand, the 8 factors are traditionally grouped into 3 divisions: wisdom panna, ethical conduct sila, and mental discipline samadhi. These 3 divisions support and reinforce one another in a beautiful, upward spiral of development. The journey begins with the division of wisdom panna, which acts as the rudder and the compass for our raft. It ensures we are heading in the right direction. The first path factor is right view samadhitti. This is the foundation of the entire path. It is not about accepting a belief system blindly, but about cultivating a perspective that is in harmony with reality. It is the effort to see the world through the lens of the Four Noble Truths and the 3 marks of existence, to understand the nature of suffering, its cause, the possibility of its end, and the path to that end. It is to see, ever more deeply, the truth of impermanence, anicca, and not self, anatta. Without right view, our efforts could be wasted, like a powerful ship sailing determinedly in the wrong direction. Right view gives rise to the second factor, right intention samma sankappa. If right view is the correct map, right intention is the firm decision to follow it. It is the conscious purifying of our motivations. It has 3 aspects. First is the intention of renunciation, which means the intention to let go of our clinging, our craving, and our sensual attachments. Second is the intention of goodwill, which is the active cultivation of love and kindness, the direct opposite of ill will and hatred. Third is the intention of harmlessness, or non-cruelty, which is the aspiration to cause no harm to any living being. These 3 intentions, to let go, to love, and not to harm, are the noble motivations that steer our heart towards liberation. With our compass set and our intentions pure, we turn to the division of ethical conduct sila. This is the main body of our raft, the physical structure that allows us to navigate the waters of the world with grace and integrity. It is how we manifest our inner wisdom in our outer actions. The third factor is right speech samavaka. This is the practice of using our words skillfully. It means abstaining from lying, from divisive speech that sets people against one another, from harsh or abusive speech that wounds others, and from idle chatter that clutters the mind. It is the commitment to speak what is true, kind, helpful, and timely. The fourth factor is right action samakamanta. This is the practice of acting in ways that do not cause harm. Traditionally, this is expressed as refraining from killing, from stealing, and from engaging in sexual misconduct. More broadly, it is a deep commitment to non-violence and respect for the well-being and property of all beings. It is aligning our physical behavior with our compassionate intentions. The fifth factor, right livelihood samma ajiva, extends this ethical consideration into our professional lives. It is the principle of earning a living in a way that is honorable and does not cause harm to others. This means avoiding professions that trade in weapons, in human beings, in poison, or intoxicants. In a modern context, it is a call to reflect on the impact of our work. Does it contribute to the welfare of the world, or does it cause exploitation, deceit, or environmental destruction? It is about making our work an integrated part of our spiritual path, not something separate from it. Finally, we have the division of mental discipline samadhi. This is the engine of the raft and the skill of the person sailing it. This is where we train the mind itself, creating the stability and clarity needed to power our journey. The sixth factor is right effort, samavayama, the balanced and joyful energy we have already explored. It is the steady persistence required to weed the garden of the mind, removing the unwholesome and cultivating the wholesome. The seventh factor is right mindfulness samasati, the heart of the entire path. It is the moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness of our body, our feelings, our mind, and the phenomena around us. Mindfulness is the lookout on the raft, seeing clearly what is happening in the present moment, the changing currents, the approaching storms, the clear skies allowing us to navigate with skill and precision. The eighth and final factor is right concentration, sama samadhi. This is the fruit of sustained right effort and right mindfulness. As the mind is trained to rest on a single object, like the breath, without distraction, it becomes profoundly calm, unified, and powerful. This one-pointed concentration is the state where the water in the jar becomes perfectly clear. It is in these states of deep meditative calm, or jhana, that the most profound and liberating insights into the nature of reality can arise. These 8 strands, woven together, create an unbreakable cord. The ethical conduct of sila provides a foundation of peacefulness and self-respect that allows for deep concentration. The mental discipline of samadhi stills the mind so that the clear light of wisdom, panna, can shine through, and that wisdom, in turn, inspires and purifies our ethical conduct. It is a complete, holistic, an interdependent system for human flourishing. It is not a list of rules to be grimly followed, but a graceful design for living. The Noble Eightfold Path is the Buddha's ultimate answer to the question of how to be your own savior. It is the raft, and by building it and sailing it with diligence, we carry ourselves across the great river of suffering to the safe and peaceful shore of liberation. As we embark on the Noble Eightfold Path, our raft for crossing the river of suffering, we begin to work with the tangible aspects of our lives, bringing our inner wisdom into our outer world. The division of ethical conduct, or sila, provides the very structure of this vessel, and its first and most vital plank is that of right speech, or shammavaka. We live our lives immersed in a sea of words. From the moment we wake to the moment we sleep, we are speaking, listening, reading, and writing. We use words so constantly and casually that we often forget their immense power. But our words are not mere sounds or symbols. They are a potent form of karma. They are actions that have the power to build, to heal, and to create heavens of understanding and connection, or to destroy, to wound, and to create hells of resentment and separation. To practice right speech is to awaken to this power, to transform our words from unconscious habits into conscious tools of compassion and wisdom. The Buddha, with his characteristic clarity, broke this practice down into 4 main components. The first principle of right speech is to abstain from falsehoods. On the surface, this seems simpler, don't lie, but its roots go much deeper. It includes the obvious act of deliberately deceiving someone for personal gain. But it also encompasses the more subtle forms of untruth we engage in daily. It means refraining from exaggeration to make ourselves look better, from making promises we have no intention of keeping, from spreading rumors we haven't verified, and from the quiet deception of omitting crucial information. To commit to truthful speech is to commit to a life of radical integrity. It aligns our inner world with our outer expression, which has the profound effect of simplifying our lives. When you always speak the truth, you never have to remember which story you told to whom. You are free from the enormous stress and complexity that comes from maintaining a web of lies. However, right speech is not a license for brutal, unskillful honesty. Just because something is true does not mean it must be said. The truth must always be filtered through the other principles, starting with kindness. The second principle is to abstain from divisive speech. This is the act of refraining from slander, from backbiting, from any form of language that aims to set one person or group against another. In our modern world, this practice is more relevant than ever. It is the conscious choice not to participate in office gossip that poisons the work environment. It is the refusal to forward a malicious rumor about a neighbor. On a larger scale, it is the wisdom to step away from the divisive, polarizing rhetoric that dominates so much of our social and political discourse. Divisive speech is an act of violence. It creates enemies, fosters suspicion, and deepens the painful illusion of us versus them. The practice of right speech, conversely, is to use our words to build bridges. It is the effort to speak of the good qualities in others, to try to foster understanding between people in conflict, and to emphasize our shared humanity rather than our superficial differences. It is the voice that asks, how can we bring these people together instead of whose side are you on? The third principle of right speech is to abstain from harsh or abusive language. The wounds inflicted by physical violence often heal, but the scars left by cruel words can last a lifetime. Harsh speech includes obvious forms like yelling, insulting, and cursing at someone, but it also includes the more subtle barbs of sarcasm intended to wound, a contemptuous or condescending tone, and belittling humor. These are all expressions of the fire of anger, the hot coal made audible. They create an atmosphere of fear and resentment, shutting down any possibility of open, honest communication. The practice here is to cultivate gentleness. It is to learn to speak to others, even those with whom we strongly disagree, with a fundamental respect for their dignity. It is to communicate our needs and our boundaries clearly and firmly, but without the need to attack or demean. It is to remember that behind every face is a heart that, like our own, wishes to be happy and to avoid pain. The fourth and final principle is to abstain from idle chatter. This is perhaps the most challenging for us in a culture that fears silence and fills every available space with noise. Idle chatter is speech that has no wholesome purpose. It is pointless gossip, aimless speculation, and conversation that simply kills time, draining our mental energy and cluttering our minds. This doesn't mean we must become stern and humorless, unable to enjoy light. Pleasant conversation, connection, and warmth are wholesome. The practice is about becoming mindful of our intention. Is this conversation building connection, sharing useful information, or creating joy? Or is it simply a habitual way to avoid the silence, to distract ourselves from our own thoughts, or to engage in negativity? To practice this is to value not only our words, but the power of noble silence. It is to recognize that sometimes the most skillful and compassionate thing we can say is nothing at all. To help us navigate these four principles in the heat of the moment, we can use a simple and powerful set of filters, sometimes known as the 3 gates. Before you speak, imagine your words must pass through these gates. At the first gate, you ask yourself, is it true? If it is not, it should not be spoken. If it is true, it proceeds to the second gate, where you ask, is it kind? If it is not kind, one should reconsider unless it is absolutely necessary. If it is both true and kind, it comes to the final gate. Is it beneficial or necessary? Will these words be helpful? Will they improve the situation? Or are they better left unsaid? If a statement can pass through all 3 of these gates, it is very likely to be an expression of right speech. Of course, right speech is not just about what we say. It is also about how we listen. Skillful speech is born from skillful listening. This means cultivating the practice of deep listening, or compassionate listening. It is the act of offering our full, undivided presence to another person, with the sole intention of understanding their perspective and their feelings. It means we stop listening in order to formulate our reply, to win an argument, or to interject with our own story. We simply listen. This quality of silent, focused, compassionate attention is one of the most profound and healing gifts we can offer another human being. It creates a space of safety where true understanding can dawn. The irrevocable power of our words is perfectly captured in the story of a man who spread false rumors about a wise village sage. Consumed by guilt, the man went to the sage to apologize and ask how he could make amends. The sage listened patiently and then gave him a simple instruction. Go, take a feather pillow, climb to the highest point in the village, cut it open, and shake all the feathers into the wind. The man, though puzzled, did as he was told. He returned to the sage and said, "I have done it." "Good," replied the sage. "Now, for the second part of your penance, go and gather every single one of those feathers and bring them back to me." The man looked crestfallen. "But that's impossible," he cried. "The wind has carried them everywhere. I could never find them all." "Exactly," the sage said softly. "And so it is with your words. You can speak them in an instant, but you can never gather them all back. They scatter on the winds and cause harm in ways you will never see and can never fully mend. Right speech, then, is the moment-by-moment practice of handling these feathers with the utmost care, ensuring that the words we release into the world are seeds of kindness, truth, and harmony, not sources of regret and pain. As we continue to weave together the strands of the Noble Eightfold Path, we move from the realm of our words into the world of our physical deeds. If right speech teaches us to be mindful of the impact of our communication, then right action and right livelihood call us to bring that same mindful, ethical awareness into our every physical act and into the very work that sustains our lives. These practices close the gap between our inner aspirations and our outer reality. They are the ultimate embodiment of integrity, ensuring that the peace and wisdom we cultivate in the quiet of meditation are not contradicted by the way we move through the world and earn our living. They ask the fundamental question, is my life, in its entirety, a force for healing and harmony, or a source of harm, right action, or sammakamanta, is the application of our compassionate intention to our physical behavior. At its core, it is a commitment to the principle of non-harm. Traditionally, this is expressed as 3 fundamental abstentions. The first is to abstain from taking life on its most basic level. This is a commitment not to kill other human beings, but in its deeper expression, it becomes a cultivation of a profound reverence for all life. It encourages us to see the world not as a resource to be dominated, but as a vibrant community of living beings. It informs our relationship with animals and the natural environment, fostering a desire to protect rather than to destroy. It is the active practice of being a guardian of life in a world where destruction is all too common. The second aspect of right action is to abstain from taking what is not given. This, of course, includes the obvious act of stealing, but its spirit extends far beyond that. It is a commitment to radical honesty and respect for the efforts and property of others. It means not exploiting people for personal gain, not taking credit for work that is not our own, not wasting shared resources, and not engaging in deceitful business practices. The opposite of stealing is not merely non-stealing. It is generosity, To fully practice this principle is to cultivate a generous heart, to give freely of our time, our energy, and our resources where we can, and to ensure that all of our dealings with others are transparent and fair. The third aspect is to abstain from sexual misconduct. This is not a call for puritanical repression, but a call to bring kindness, honesty, and a commitment to non-harm into our most intimate relationships. It means refraining from any sexual act that involves exploitation, coercion, or deceit. It is about honoring the commitments we have made and ensuring that our sexual expression is a source of mutual respect, connection, and well-being, rather than one of emotional pain, betrayal, or suffering for ourselves or others. Together, these three principles of right action form a powerful ethical container for our lives. They create a foundation of harmlessness and trustworthiness that brings a deep sense of peace and self-respect, calming the mind and creating the stable ground necessary for deeper meditative practice. This ethical framework then extends into the largest portion of our waking lives, our work. This is the practice of right livelihood, or Shamma Ayiva. For most of us, our job is not just a source of income. It is a primary way that we structure our time and interact with society. If this work is fundamentally in conflict with our core values, our life will be fractured. We will be living in a state of constant inner contradiction, trying to cultivate peace in our hearts while actively participating in a system that may cause harm. Right livelihood asks us to examine our professional lives with the same mindful inquiry we bring to our meditation cushion. The Buddha originally outlined 5 types of livelihood to be avoided: dealing in weapons, in living beings such as raising animals for slaughter or slave trading, in meat production, in intoxicants, and in poisons. In our complex modern world, we can reflect on the spirit of these principles and extend them. A livelihood in weapons might now include working for industries that profit from conflict, aggression, or social division. A livelihood in intoxicants might extend to designing addictive technologies, from gambling apps to social media algorithms that are intentionally engineered to hijack human attention for profit. A livelihood in poisons could be seen in industries that knowingly pollute our environment or produce harmful products. The point is not to create a rigid list of forbidden jobs, but to foster a spirit of honest self-reflection. Is my work, at its core, contributing to the health and well-being of the world, or is it contributing to the suffering? This examination is not meant to induce guilt, but to inspire wisdom and courage. For some, it may lead to a clear decision to change careers. For many others, it is about finding the ethical space within their current work. It is about choosing to act with integrity, to treat colleagues with respect, to refuse to cut corners, and to be a force for positive change within one's own sphere of influence. But the practice of right livelihood goes even deeper. It teaches us that any form of ethical work, no matter how humble or seemingly mundane, can be transformed into a profound spiritual practice. There is a story of a head cook in a Zen monastery who was regarded as a great master. A young, ambitious monk, seeking profound truths, was puzzled by this. He saw the cook spending all day washing rice, chopping vegetables, and cleaning pots. He asked the cook, Why do you work so hard in the kitchen? Why aren't you spending your time studying the sutras or doing long hours of meditation? The old cook paused, held up a single carrot, and smiled. "This," he said, "is my practice. When I wash the rice, I wash all the dust of the world from my mind. When I chop the vegetables, I cut away my own anger and greed. When I cook for the community, I am nourishing the body of the Buddha. My kitchen is my meditation hall, and this work is my path." This is the ultimate secret of mindful work, the focus and attention of a software programmer, the care and presence of a parent raising a child, the patience of a teacher, the thoroughness of a person cleaning a room. Any of these can become a form of meditation when they are infused with mindfulness and a spirit of service. We stop seeing work as a grim necessity, a chore to be endured between weekends. We see it as an opportunity, a vast field for practice. It is a chance to practice patience when things go wrong, to practice compassion with difficult colleagues, and to practice mindfulness in every single task, right action and right livelihood. Woven together are the practice of a fully integrated life. They dissolve the false boundary between the sacred and the secular, inviting us to find our path to liberation not by escaping the world, but by engaging with it fully, with integrity, wisdom, and a compassionate heart. We have traveled an immense distance on this inner journey together. We began in a place of waiting, feeling like passengers in our own lives, looking to the external world for a savior to rescue us from a quiet, unnamed dissatisfaction. We have since given that dissatisfaction a name, dukkha. We have looked it in the eye, not as an enemy to be feared, but as a noble truth to be understood. We have journeyed through the intricate landscapes of the mind, discovering that we are the architects of our own reality through the power of our thoughts and the karmic force of our intentions. We have faced the inner demons of attachment and aversion, not with weapons, but with the disarming power of mindful awareness. We have cultivated the boundless states of the heart, love, compassion, joy, and a deep, unshakable equanimity. We have laid out the master blueprint for an awakened life, the noble eightfold path. And so, after all this, we must ask, where is the destination? When do we finally arrive at a place of permanent, unshakable peace? It is here that we must face one of the most subtle and final attachments, the attachment to the idea of a destination itself. The profound and liberating truth is that there is no final arrival point, no cosmic graduation ceremony where you are handed a certificate of enlightenment. Peace is not a destination you reach after a long and arduous journey. Peace is the way you learn to walk the journey. The goal is the path itself. We must abandon the idea that spiritual practice is a grim ordeal to be endured in order to get to a future reward. This very mindset is just another form of craving, another way of postponing our happiness and creating suffering in the present moment. True success on this path is not measured by the complete absence of difficulty, but by the radical transformation of our relationship with difficulty. It is not about never again feeling a wave of anger, but about having the mindfulness to see the wave as it forms, the wisdom not to be swept away by it, and the compassion to soothe the hurt that lies beneath it. It is not about never feeling sadness, but about having the capacity to hold our sorrow in a vast, tender awareness, allowing it to move through us without becoming our identity. We can think of it like learning to surf. A beginner stands on the shore, fearing the waves and wishing the ocean were flat. They believe success is the absence of waves. But a master surfer knows that the waves will never stop coming. The joy and the skill are not in stopping the ocean, but in learning to ride its powerful, unpredictable energy with balance, grace, and flexibility. Life will always present us with waves of gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. The practice is not about building a seawall strong enough to hold back the ocean. It is about becoming a skillful surfer. The perfect symbol for this form of liberation is the lotus flower. The lotus seed begins its life buried in the dark, murky, foul-smelling mud at the bottom of a pond. This mud represents the messy reality of our ordinary, conditioned existence, the world of greed, hatred, ignorance, and suffering. The lotus does not try to deny the mud or escape from it. It sinks its roots deep into the mud and uses the very muck and mire as the source of its own nourishment. This is a crucial lesson. We do not need to escape our difficult emotions, our challenging relationships, or our imperfect world to find freedom. We use the very substance of our suffering as the fuel for our awakening. The stalk of the lotus then pushes its way up through the murky, unclear water, reaching for the light. This is the journey of the path, the steady, persistent effort of practice. And then it happens. The lotus blossom emerges on the surface of the water and opens its petals to the sun. It is pristine, beautiful, radiant, and fragrant, completely unstained by the mud from which it grew. When water splashes onto its petals, the droplets bead up and roll off, leaving no trace. This is the heart of a liberated being. It lives in the world, but it is not of the world. It is able to experience the full spectrum of life, both the beauty and the pain, without being stained or defined by it. It can feel compassion without being drowned in sorrow, and it can feel joy without clinging to it. This is the freedom of being able to walk in the rain without getting wet. It is not about finding a shelter to hide from the rain. It is about realizing an inner quality that is weatherproof. The peace you seek is not in a different place. It is in a different way of being in this very place. This brings us full circle, back to the fundamental premise of our entire journey. No one can save you but yourself. After all this exploration, this phrase should no longer sound like a lonely burden, but like the most empowering and joyful truth imaginable. The savior you were waiting for was never going to arrive from the outside. The savior is the practice. The savior is the moment you choose to return your wandering attention to your breath. The savior is the moment you choose a kind word over a harsh one. The savior is the moment you meet your own pain with compassion instead of fear. The savior is the moment you see another person's happiness and allow your heart to feel joy. The path is not something you are walking on. The path is something you are creating with every mindful step you take. You are not separate from the path. You are the path. The journey to find a savior ends when you realize that the capacity to save yourself has been your own innate nature all along. The lamp has always been in your hand. This entire journey was not about finding a new lamp, but about seeing the one you have been carrying all this time and learning, with patience and with kindness, how to light it, how to protect its flame from the winds of the world, and how to use its warm, clear light to illuminate the way, moment by moment by moment. We have reached the end of our shared time together. The final steps on this particular part of the path. Our journey began in a place of quiet desperation, with the universal human feeling of waiting for something or someone outside of ourselves to grant us permission to be happy, to fix what felt broken, to finally save us. We looked outward for a hero and found only the reflection of our own longing. And so, we turned inward. We began the courageous work of looking directly at our own lives, at our own minds. We found the courage to name our deep, pervasive dissatisfaction, the truth of dukkha. We explored the intricate machinery of our own minds, discovering the profound power of our thoughts and intentions to shape our reality. We learned to sit with the great inner fires of attachment and aversion, not as enemies to be vanquished, but as teachers to be understood. We mapped the territory of the heart, cultivating kindness, compassion, joy, and a vast, unshakable equanimity. We discovered that within us was not only the source of our suffering, but also the blueprint for our liberation, the Noble Eightfold Path. If there is one essential truth to carry forth from this journey, let it be this: peace is not a destination. It is not a prize awarded at the end of a long struggle, nor is it a permanent state of bliss found in some distant, perfected future. Peace is a practice. It is a skill. It is the conscious, moment-by-moment choice to meet our lives with awareness instead of reactivity, with compassion instead of judgment, and with wisdom instead of ignorance. The frantic search for an external savior ends with the quiet, transformative realization that the power to heal has been within us all along. The ultimate truth is that the hero we were waiting for is our own awakened presence. The capacity to be mindful of a single breath is the savior. The choice to offer a single word of kindness is the savior. The willingness to hold our own pain with a tender heart is the savior. The statement that began our journey, "No one can save you but yourself," is not a decree of lonely isolation. It is the ultimate declaration of your freedom and your power. It is the final recognition that you are, and have always been, the author of your own peace. The work does not end here. The work begins again. In this very moment, the path is not something you must strive to find. The path is the ground beneath your feet. The path is the air you are breathing. Right now, you hold the map. You are the light. You are the refuge. The journey is yours. Begin.